area is the growing inequality of income and wealth, and what measures should complement the announced increase in the top income tax rate and the reduction in the middle tax rate. To offset the benefit of the middle bracket tax cut for high-income groups, I think it would be wise to increase the taxes in the brackets for number 3 and number 4, so that
I could interrupt for a minute. The way it's listed on my list, it has you together. It's really 2 separate. So you have 5 minutes, and then Kerry will have 5 minutes later. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So the first suggestion would be to offset the benefits that the middle tax rate cut affords to higher income groups by increasing the tax rates in the 3rd and 4th brackets. The next thing would be to help those at the bottom of the income distribution and to facilitate a transition to a basic income guarantee, make all non-refundable tax credits refundable, enhance them, especially the disability tax credit, and claw them back like the GST credit, the child tax credit, and the guaranteed income supplement. Finally, broaden the tax base to complement the increase in the top tax rate by reducing or eliminating the 50% exemption for capital gains. By considering an upper limit on capital gains exemption for housing, and reduce the use of the small business deduction to shelter income by denying its use by professionals and by restricting the hiring of family members. The second area is innovation and business taxes. I would retain the small business deduction but reinstate a cumulative upper limit to prevent the disincentive for small businesses to grow. I would allow a carry forward of losses with interest, and I would consider encouraging innovation by flow-through share financing of R&D investments so that deductions are afforded to the owner, to the equity holder, and studying the use of patent or intellectual property boxes to encourage the exploitation of innovations in Canada. In the longer term, I would consider major reforms to the corporate tax, such as those that have been proposed in the UK, in the US, and many tax reform commissions around the world, in particular what's called the allowance for corporate equity system that's been introduced in some countries in Europe. Third, some remarks on federal-provincial fiscal arrangements. To protect both vertical balance and horizontal balance in the Federation and to enhance the integrity of federal-provincial fiscal relations, I would restore formula-based equalization by removing the GDP growth limit. I would escalate the Canada Social Transfer, Canada Health Transfer by the average rate of growth of provincial expenditures on social programs. And I would enhance federal and provincial cooperation by seeking federal government membership in the Council of the Federation. Those are my remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bordway. Turning to Mr. Bunnell, who's the Head School of Fisheries, Fisheries and Marine Institute of Memorial University. Go ahead. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. The views that I'm going to be expressing today are my views, but are grounded in my capacity as industry co-chair of the Canadian Seafood Value Chain Roundtable. The Roundtable provides leadership to the Canadian seafood industry by providing a forum for value chain participants to identify significant industry impediments, collaborate on solutions and innovation, and influence decision makers. Its vision is for a prosperous and competitive Canadian seafood industry that is a world leader and the preferred supplier of high-value seafood domestically and internationally. The Canadian fish and seafood industry is an important producer of high-quality food and a significant contributor to Canada's economy, especially in rural, coastal, and Aboriginal communities. Thousands of Canadian families, businesses, employees, and their communities depend on this industry to provide for their well-being. In total, more than 80,000 Canadians were employed in the harvesting, production, and seafood processing sector in 2014. The seafood industry in Canada is very much export-oriented, with approximately 75% of its production exported to foreign markets annually, making it the highest export-oriented sector of the food manufacturing industry in Canada. In 2014, the industry exported $4.9 billion of high-quality seafood, ranking as the world's 8th largest seafood exporter. Approximately 64% of exports were destined for the United States, followed by China and the European Union at 10% and 9% respectively. In reviewing the Government of Canada's mandate letters, I am very pleased to see government's commitment to ocean science, to the protection of our fisheries for future generations, as well as to an economically successful, responsible, and environmentally sustainable aquaculture industry. I'm also encouraged to see the priority that the government will be giving to job creation, innovation, food safety, and the support of exports. Overall, the Canadian seafood industry is very proud of the contribution that it is making to the Canadian economy and to global food security. However, the sector is not without its challenges, and there are certainly steps the Government of Canada can take to help expand the global competitiveness of the sector and leverage its economic potential. Related to this, I would like to outline 2 key areas for priority investment in this sector, namely around market readiness and social license. On the topic of market readiness, the seafood industry in Canada is extremely excited about the expansion of the Government of Canada's efforts around global trade agreements such as CETA, TPP, and Canada-Korea, just to name a few. As an export-oriented industry, these agreements provide Canadian seafood producers with improved market access opportunities through the reduction and elimination of prohibitive tariff barriers, ideally resulting in increased industry competitiveness. However, significant market readiness barriers exist in the Canadian seafood industry that impact its ability to fully leverage the potential of these trade agreements as well as other global market opportunities. Examples include the need for improved market intelligence to support the market development needs of the industry, the need for investment in innovation and automation in the sector, as well as a strategy to address the labour retention challenges in the industry given current demographic profiles. On the topic of social license, there is a need for continued engagement and investment on the subject of science requirements for eco-certification in particular. Issues around traceability and eco-certification are now considered requirements for global market access and represent a non-tariff trade barrier if Canadian producers cannot meet robust international eco-certification standards, such as the Marine Stewardship Council and best aquaculture practices for the wild and aquaculture sectors, respectively. Key public investment in fisheries and ocean science, including sustainable aquaculture development, are critical to ensure the industry continues to meet and exceed best practices. A major challenge for the seafood sector related to addressing its market readiness challenge is the fact that it is largely a sector without a home within the Government of Canada. Let me explain further. Fisheries and Oceans Canada's mandate is very much focused on its regulatory responsibilities and does not include enabling programs to support the innovation, the competitiveness, and overall market development needs of the industry. By comparison, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada has a Growing Forward 2 program that is focused on the innovation, competitiveness, and overall market development needs of the agri-food sector. The program envelope includes about $3 billion in investment by federal, provincial, and territorial governments over a 5-year period, and Ag Canada specifically administers a $1 billion agri-innovation, agri-competitiveness, and agri-marketing support program. Seafood sector support under this initiative is limited to the agri-marketing program with a funding envelope of approximately $2.5 million per year. While the support is highly valued, it falls well short of meeting the broader needs of the sector given present challenges. Ultimately, seafood is a significant contributor to Canadian food production and should have equitable access to public programming to help improve its overall competitiveness. We're currently living in a period of unprecedented global change that will significantly impact seafood production in the years ahead. For example, the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations currently estimates that an additional 40 million tons of aquatic food will be required by 2030 just to maintain current per capita consumption. It also estimates that the average price of traded seafood products are expected to grow by 30% by 2022 based on factors such as increasing health awareness, rapidly expanding middle-class societies, and growing disposable income. In conclusion, the Canadian seafood industry is very well positioned to address these grand challenges by providing high-quality, safe, and healthy sources of protein to the global community. Key strategic areas of investment by the Government of Canada present a tremendous opportunity for Canadian seafood producers to take advantage of globally expanding markets for sustainably and responsibly sourced seafood. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bonnell. And turning to the Partners for Mental Health, Mr. Mannion, and I might remind people, don't go too fast on reading your document. We are doing translation, and they can only translate so fast.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and committee members, for the opportunity to address this critical issue for Canadians. Michael Kirby, who's the driving force behind this effort, sends his best wishes and his thanks for hearing this issue. You probably already know the statistics. When we talk about suicide among young Canadians, it's the second leading cause of mortality among 15 to 24-year-olds. It accounts for more deaths than all cancers combined, probably 3 times more than all cancers combined, during this age period. If we're talking about our First Nations communities, at least 4 times as many deaths by suicide in many of our First Nations and Inuit communities across the country. The cost of one death by suicide in this age group is projected to be $1.5 million over a lifetime. Lost productivity. That does not count the incredible cost to families, to communities, to schools who are dealing with this issue on an ongoing basis, usually for years after an event. So the cost of human suffering is actually measurable. In terms of the number of young people that experience this problem, 8% of young people tell us they have actually tried to kill themselves. About 25% tell us they've had serious recurring thoughts of killing themselves. This is not a very isolated event. This is actually an event that occurs again and again, day in and day out. This week I've received a call from a community in Ontario where they've had 2 deaths in the last 2 weeks, 2 more young people hospitalized with severe attempts, which will have major costs to our healthcare system for probably years to come. So it's really a symptom of a sector that is not meeting the needs of our children and youth, a mental health sector that is probably dysfunctional in many respects. And if we're going to be doing something transformational around preventing suicide, probably the biggest impact is beginning with children and youth, and we have an opportunity to make some significant change with youth. We're proposing a $100 million National Youth Suicide Prevention Fund to actually take what we already know from evidence, apply it in Canadian context, measure it as applied in 25 communities across Canada to demonstrate how we can have evidence-informed decision-making for real change in preventing death by suicide, particularly in our young people. That's a very bold request. The reality is that Canadians are tired of reading the newspaper every day about one more young person who's lost their lives to suicide. They don't want talk, they want action. Young people actually deserve something bold, and they need to know that we are actually thinking about them and their lives at this time. The proposal itself is built on what we know from evidence, particularly in Europe, where they've had a whole community approach to youth suicide prevention with significant impact. Partners have brought together experts from across Canada in youth suicide prevention to take this evidence, apply it in context, but also add elements that can enhance what we've seen happen in Europe. The rates of decreased suicide and suicidal behavior in Europe have been estimated about approximately 24%. We have over 500 young people that die by suicide every year. If we can eliminate 24%, that's 120 lives that have been changed, 120 families that live a different course, 120 schools that don't have to suffer for years and years to come because of the loss of the experience. The key components of this plan: one is building capacity in primary care, both in terms of identification, but also pathways to care. Media and public awareness. What does everyone need to know in terms of identification, those at risk, and getting the right level of help at the right time? Community training so that teachers, family doctors, community members, peers know what to look for, but also how to bridge young people to the appropriate service at the right time. Targeted supports for those young people that are at risk because of their mental health status, homeless status, their living arrangement. We know in rural Canada, for example, the rates of suicide are higher. We can discuss at length why that might be. And finally, a key component added in the Canadian model is meaningful youth engagement. There's ample evidence to suggest that meaningfully engaged youth are healthier physically, emotionally, engage in less risk-taking behavior, and are less likely to think about and act on their suicidal thoughts. So we know the timing is right now because philanthropy has told us that they are prepared to participate in this. We've had several national organizations that have looked at this proposal and think that is the way to go because it's respectful of the reality of individual communities. We know the provincial governments, Michael Kirby has spoken to every provincial government, many of which are poised now to participate in this. The model is one that includes leveraging, where the fund would be matched by provincial funds, philanthropy, and business, and many of those partnerships have already been established. Letters of support have come from across Canada. Just in closing, I want to say that I've been a psychologist for 30 years working in mental health. I get mad when one more young person dies by suicide, because we should have been able to identify when they were suffering in silence. We should have been able to do something for them before they chose to take their life as the only solution to their problems. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mannion, and it's an extremely important issue. Mr. Mesland with the Council of Canadian Acadians. Academy, sorry.
That's fine, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. and members of the committee for the invitation. It is a bit of a mouthful sometimes. The Council of Canadian Academies and our member academies, the Royal Society of Canada, the Canadian Academy of Engineering, and the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences, are part of Canada's science advice community. For our part, the CCA has been helping governments understand scientifically complex issues and their policy implications for over 10 years. We provide highly credible and authoritative answers to questions asked by the federal government and other groups. We bring together the best minds from Canada and around the world, using expert panels to evaluate what is known and what is not known. These panels are multidisciplinary and multi-sectoral and can be convened on virtually any topic. You have a copy of my testimony already, so I'll just remind you of a couple of brief points. First, over the past decade, it has been noted that science advice has been underutilized in government decision-making in Canada. We fully support the renewed commitment by the Government of Canada to put evidence squarely at the center of decision-making, and we welcome, for example, the decision to establish a Chief Science Officer. Continued support for this type of leadership and similar opportunities can only serve to enhance the entire science advice community, improving integration of evidence into decision-making and strengthening public policy. The government's policy priorities cross-cut multiple departments and lessons from other countries. Indeed, you've already heard from witnesses this week and about 2 minutes ago from my colleague about a number of complex issues of central importance to Canada's future: innovation, mental health, green infrastructure. We believe, Mr. Chair, that additional investment in science advice would aid in developing policy on each one of these issues and many others. Second, as to our place in this system, the Government of Canada established the CCA in 2005 with a commitment of $30 million over 10 years. This commitment was renewed in 2015 for a further 5 years at the same funding level. With this modest investment, however, the CCA has completed 29 separate assessments for federal agencies on a diverse range of topics of importance to Canadians, from STEM employment to policing. We've also leveraged outside funding to undertake studies on issues like climate change technology and marine shipping. As we mentioned in our submitted testimony, our studies have influenced the development of a number of policies and programs by the government and others. With innovation very much on everyone's mind, we believe that innovation in science advice is every bit as important as innovation in other aspects of our economy. A good example is the way we incorporated traditional knowledge into a report on Aboriginal food security in the North. We also recognize that using evidence to inform policy must, after all, fit into the larger political reality. Some policy questions should be responded to quickly because they are motivated by the urgency of current events. The topic of the Zika virus comes to mind. Others benefit from more deep assessments that require longer-term consideration. Both of these are needed, and we do both of them at the CCA. That said, 3 factors limit our ability to be as responsive as we would like to be and as we believe the government should expect of us. First, requests for our work are submitted through a lengthy review and approval process, which does affect our ability to take up studies quickly. Second, while we are taking steps now to be more innovative in our own work, for example by developing a more robust suite of services, our current funding envelope may constrain such robust plans. Lastly, we are now entering the second year of the current 5-year funding plan, which inhibits our capacity to plan and to undertake future work, something that anyone working in science or in policy can appreciate. Taken together, these factors may disincline potential sponsors from submitting requests at the very moment when they are most needed. The government would, we think, signal its strong commitment to using science in policy making by making further investment in the CCA to enable more studies from more sponsors on more topics using more innovative approaches. I should close with a quote from the mandate letter to the Minister of Science, with which I'm sure you're all familiar and with which we wholeheartedly agree. Quote, "We are a government that believes in science and a government that believes that good scientific knowledge should inform decision-making." Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mislin. Turning to Polytechnics Canada, Ms. Robinson, the floor is yours, Nabina.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and members of this committee for including us in your important week of pre-budget hearings. Polytechnics Canada represents leading research-intensive, publicly funded polytechnics and colleges. All our members grant bachelor's degrees and offer industry-aligned post-secondary credentials, including trades training. A polytechnic education builds a resilient and resourceful workforce. Canada needs more of this kind of applied education. Our education and training and our R&D and commercialization services help employers and companies to grow. The work our members do provides a cornerstone for building and supporting Canada's middle class. As you seek ideas for economic growth, polytechnic education is one of the solutions Canada needs more of, whether it be tackling youth unemployment, supporting workers who form the bedrock of the middle class, or building the technical talent required for green infrastructure. Canada needs talent and innovation ecosystems where every player contributes their unique strengths. For too long, Canada's productivity has been held back by our fragmented, siloed, and incomplete approaches to talent and innovation. To bridge excellence to access, discovery to commercialization, and smart workers to smart jobs, we need an inclusive approach. Despite progress made in recent years, federal supports for an inclusive national talent strategy remain imbalanced and inadequate. Let's remember, people innovate and companies commercialize. Innovation without talent is like science without ideas. Our universities and academic scientists play a crucial role, but they can't get their inventions to market without the attention being paid to the rest of the ecosystem, the R&D technicians and industry partners who bring innovations to the marketplace, especially in our small and mid-sized businesses. The value of discovery research is not realized until people also perform the collaborative, near-to-market work, such as prototyping, beta testing, and market validation, that polytechnics with their industry partners excel at. Unmuzzling science will not spur innovation. We need to unleash the innovative talent of polytechnic graduates and support the practical needs of Canada's entrepreneurs outside academe. Our written submission presents a suite of 10 targeted investments that will both strengthen our ecosystem for the long term and help kickstart our economic turnaround in the short term. There are three broad categories of proposals. 1, balancing supports for innovation. 2, delivering Canada's infrastructure priorities with apprenticeship action. And 3, building a modern labor force through better data. Let me give you highlights. With respect to innovation, we call for increased funding for NSERC's College and Community Innovation Program by $15 million annually. Currently, the program is oversubscribed, having to limit competitions for funding, while also spending future year funding on future competitions now. Yet, this $53 million program only makes up a paltry 5% of NSERC's annual billion-dollar budget. In the private sector, when something is in demand because it works, you supply more of it. No policy rationale exists for excluding the college sector from equitable support for staff and infrastructure costs that support our legitimate research activities. This is an imbalance that can easily be fixed by increasing the Research Support Fund by $25 million, and in doing so, signal fair treatment for all post-secondary research, not just university research. To ensure Canada has the skilled workers needed to build and maintain our infrastructure over the next decade, polytechnics offer a variety of world-leading programs in construction management and the building trades. However, many of these programs have long waiting lists, while employers are reporting shortages of these very skilled workers. Therefore, we recommend a high-demand training capacity fund. Finally, Canada needs reliable labour market information that leads to informed career choices. If employers and learners had access to accurate information about the publicly funded professional and technical training programs we offer, about the earning power of our polytechnic graduates, we would be better able to guide young Canadians towards programs with solid employment prospects. Possible financial incentives for more co-op opportunities need to be evidence-based. Better LMI leads to better prospects for our unemployed, older workers, newcomers, Indigenous learners, and even temporary foreign workers. Federal leadership and investment for evidence-based labour market data is vital now. I hope you will take time to consider our recommendations. Growing the Canadian economy requires harnessing the many solutions offered by a polytechnic education. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Robinson. And we'll turn to the Retail Council of Canada, Carl Littler, who's Vice President, Public Affairs. Welcome, Carl. You've been around here before.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Thanks for allowing me to contribute to your pre-budget deliberations and to speak to some of the issues that matter to our industry. For members who haven't heard from us before, RCC is a not-for-profit industry association. Founded in 1963, we represent over 45,000 storefronts and include within our membership department, grocery, specialty, independent stores, and online merchants. RCC's members sell over 70% of all consumer goods sold in Canada, and we employ a majority of the 2.2 million Canadians who work in retail. That makes us the largest employer group in the largest employment sector in Canada, and one of the very few with a presence in just about every community nationwide. Paradoxically, because retail is so ubiquitous, it sometimes goes unnoticed by policymakers. The exceptions tend to be when there are merger proposals like the recent one between Lowe's and Rona, or shutdowns like Target's of last year that tend to break into headline news. I can reassure you that our industry is in fact pretty healthy. We grew by 3.9% in 2014, or about 2% above inflation. And while we don't have final numbers for 2015, they will likely come in north of 3%, despite a relatively disappointing December. 2014 also saw an increase of 21,000 jobs in our retail sector. So to paraphrase Mark Twain, reports of our death are greatly exaggerated. That is not to say, however, that retail does not face significant challenges. The exchange rate in particular is a big one for us. While the falling Canadian dollar may help curtail cross-border shopping in the near term, it does create a long-term upward pressure on prices. We've seen this first in grocery items, and we'll see the effects on other goods over the course of the year. Some of you may have seen our chairman, Michael Medline's comments to this effect in today's Globe and Mail. Retailers continually strive to keep prices affordable for consumers, and while I'd like to pretend that's altruism, it's largely because it's a necessity in a highly competitive environment. And of course, there are public policy issues that have effects on these prices. I'd like to touch on two of these areas, namely tariffs and payments, although in our written brief we do speak to de minimis, CPP enhancement, EI changes, and also payments. A couple of years ago, The Other Place, I think I'm supposed to call it, released a study on Canadian pricing. One of its areas of focus was the impact of the Canadian customs tariff, a 98-chapter, 7,000-line item schedule of customs duties. As we understand the original purpose of tariffs, they were tools of industrial policy designed to support domestic manufacturers. And of course, they also serve as revenue generators for government. While tariffs may once have helped Canadian manufacturers compete with imports, they're now seriously out of alignment with our manufacturing base. There are multiple examples of duties of 17 and 18% in areas where there's not even a single Canadian manufacturer. And once that industrial policy angle is lost, a tariff simply becomes another form of tax targeted at particular goods, so the bicycle tax or the affordable footwear tax, if you will. Because duties have been removed from most manufacturing inputs, this hidden tax now bites Canadian consumers almost exclusively, to the tune of $4.5 billion a year, or about 2% of the value of all consumer goods sold at retail. In numerous cases, footwear is a case in point, these hidden taxes are often double or triple the 5% GST rate on the same items. Most are not luxuries, and in many cases, they're necessities. RCC understands that the government lacks the fiscal capacity to provide immediate tariff relief across the board. What we suggest instead is to begin the process of reductions, especially where there's a duty differential between Canada and the U.S., where the duty in the U.S. is lower, because that's a situation that can help exacerbate cross-border shopping. Our other recommendation, and obviously one that's very topical for members, is to continue to pursue bilateral and multilateral free trade agreements like CETA and TPP, and to press for accelerated tax relief under those and future agreements. The second issue, if I have time, that RCC would like to see addressed is credit card interchange fees, those being the charges that merchants pay to banks every time a credit card is used for payments. These rates are non-negotiable for merchants and are set by the credit card duopoly on the bank's behalf. That's $4 billion in interchange costs, which get passed on to all Canadian consumers in the form of higher prices. Worldwide, the EU, Australia, New Zealand, Israel, among scores of other countries, have moved to cap interchange rates, and they're governments of all kinds of political stripes. They've said that enough is enough. Why should a Canadian consumer see the impact of interchange rate fees that are triple those in Australia, 5 times those in the UK? Burdened as they are by over $4 billion in customs duties and $4 billion in credit card acceptance costs, Canadians are pleased to see the committee examining ways to spur economic activity and growth. We hope that these retail sector-specific issues and the further ones that we speak to in our brief may provide some ideas in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carl. Turning to our first round of questions, 7 minutes, Mr. Grable.
Mr. Chair, and thank you to the panelists for coming here today and providing your testimony. We really appreciate it. My first question is to Kerry. You spoke about in your industry labor retention and labor shortage, and this has been a theme throughout testimony across this week, and to a large extent when you go back to your writings as well. In your perspective, what can the federal government do to ensure that it solves the problem, and specifically with the temporary foreign workers program?
Well, I think there's several perspectives that you could look at that. I mean, there's several tools in the toolkit to deal with the labor challenges in the country right now, particularly with respect to seafood. And it is a real challenge. I mean, the average age of a worker in the fish harvesting and seafood processing sector, particularly the seafood processing sector in Canada right now, is probably approaching 60 years of age. In my province alone, it's a significant issue. If you look at the Maritimes and the lobster sector, it's a massive issue. The tools include certainly investment in technology and automation and innovation. I've had an opportunity to visit facilities in Iceland and Norway. They've advanced very rapidly around technology and innovation. I made some points earlier in my statement about the need for supports for the seafood sector in that area because it is lagging due in part to the lack of support. On the issue of temporary foreign workers, there is no doubt that that is a tool in the toolkit, and certainly the changes that were made a couple of years ago to that program has had a significant impact on the seafood industry in Canada. There's little doubt about that. Certainly for the lobster sector in particular, who's been really feeling the pain, there is just not an available supply of labor. And they would look out and say, okay, well, there are other programs within the Government of Canada support the primary agricultural industry. Why are there not programs to support us? Why have the changes been made? Why can't we correct this? And we're seeing it. And if we look at other jurisdictions, again, I visited Iceland 3 months ago, and their workforce were largely migrant workers. Now, in many cases, they were now citizens right? They had a path to citizenship, and some have been there for quite a few years. But if you look at the demographic in these countries, most of them are foreign workers that are now residents in that case. We are one of the last jurisdictions to go down this road. And the reality is things like support for temporary foreign workers are a tool in the toolkit. Whether it's a long-term solution or a medium-term solution, you could debate. But the reality is if we are going to promote trade agreements, as we've been talking about here today, it's all great to remove tariffs and barriers. But if you don't have the labor to produce the product to sell to the global community, then we have a major issue on our hands.
Thank you very much for that. Ian, thank you so much for your testimony. I think the one thing we can all agree on across party lines is that this is a serious issue that needs to be addressed. My question is, what are some of the root causes that are leading our young Canadians to go down this path? And through my own research, I've heard about youth unemployment is double the national average. In my area of the country, it's about almost 15 or 16% in the region of Peel. And we're struggling across the provincial and municipal levels and the federal level, per se, to address youth unemployment and homelessness on the impact of trying to stop young Canadians going down this path.
So I think one of the major kind of root causes that we look at through evidence, we've talked a lot about evidence. I mean, there is an underlying link to mental health and mental illness. A large proportion of young people that die by suicide, when we do psychological autopsies after the fact, we can see there was either diagnosed or undiagnosed mental illness. So part of the solution has to be addressing our mental health care system, particularly for children and youth. But the young people that I talk to, there's a lost generation right now that are incredibly disengaged. They don't find that education is giving them to a vocational path that makes sense. They're sold a bill of goods in terms of going to university will solve all their problems. They don't go to colleges that might provide them with the skills necessary to make a meaningful contribution. So they're stuck in this holding pattern with no real good skills to cope with that. So I think that when we look at young people in a holistic way and how can we engage them in meaningful ways in terms of their lives, their communities, that can already make a dent. It has impacts on education, on vocational and family life, on everything you could possibly describe. So looking at it at an individual level, in terms of the possibility of illness being present and treating it, but also engaging in different ways and supporting life paths that make more sense, I think can have the biggest yield.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Robinson, thank you so much for your testimony. As a recent grad myself who's still paying his student loans off, I have a lot of sympathy with young Canadians and the importance of post-secondary education. In terms of the new economy, we have this shortage of trades and apprenticeships. You mentioned that our infrastructure program that our government's about to make should have a requirement on apprenticeship. In your opinion, is there a specific ratio there, or what's your perspective on how we can roll that out to actually solve the problem on the shortage of apprenticeships today?
Thank you so much for such a pertinent question. I'll just jump to the heart of it because you've heard me preaching already. I'm so glad that you are a recent graduate who actually understands the future of work means diverse solutions. Ratios is not within the purview of the federal government. What you can do, though, is require all your new social infrastructure, public infrastructure projects to say, give points to bidders who are committed to registered apprentices. 1. 2, when you look at what's being built, if what is being built, you want it to last for a decade or more, why can't we build roads for the next 30, 40 years? Let's go to the talent that is produced from colleges and polytechnics that are doing world-leading training in building envelope systems, for example, or green construction, or net zero homes. Let's give points for the same workers who are highly trained. So basically, you'll get a double win. You'll build your infrastructure, but you'll build a talent that will build the next set of infrastructure as well. And I would like to see your projects give that criteria.
And I was aware that it's a provincial jurisdiction, but I really appreciate your answer. My last question, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much to Mr. Littler. Thank you so much for your testimony. A quick question on the credit card and merchant fees. You mentioned the UK and another country. How do they compare to the U.S.?
So the U.S. is there are really only two countries that have rates that are comparable to Canada, and the U.S. is a comparable rate. I guess you could view it that the parent companies of both MasterCard and Visa are located there, and it is tough negotiating packages through. There have been some reductions on the debit side, which was a runaway cost by comparison to Canada, but the answer is that it's comparable on the U.S. side. Multiple other jurisdictions, India, China, Israel, Switzerland, have moved on this, though, so I'm not sure that in this case we would look to the U.S. as a sort of inspirational beacon on it.
7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to start with going back to some testimony we heard previously because I mentioned to you at the time, not on the record, that I was worried that one of our deputants, when they were presenting, had a prop behind them. And it came to my attention through Twitter last night that it's been tweeted out by the Globe and Mail reporter Bill Curry as well. And I have great concerns, and I bring it to the attention of you as the chair and for the clerk of the committee as well, that I do think it's inappropriate to have political signs posted behind you when you provide information to a committee. It clearly does not happen here. There's nobody standing with a Stop Harper sign behind any of them. It may be implicit in what they're saying, that's okay, but it's no physical sign. And we object to that happening. We didn't do anything at the time because it was very difficult to see and ascertain exactly what was on it. But clearly from what we're seeing on Twitter, what we're seeing from people telling us, we can conclusively say that it was a Stop Harper sign and it had to do with political campaign issues, and we think it was inappropriate. And I hope that you take some action to ensure that this doesn't happen going forward.
Thank you. Your concern is noted. I seen the sign. I didn't think it said Stop Harper, but if you get the evidence it does, then that shouldn't happen, and we'll correct it in terms of any more video conferencing that is done. That's an appropriate concern.
I appreciate it. You were very open to hearing about the point yesterday, and we agreed that we should make sure that's exactly what it said, and that's what we did overnight. So thank you for your time on that. With respect to our witnesses, thank you very much for your presentations. I will tell you that I'm probably going to focus on Dr. Meslin because I have a great passion for the, wait, am I talking about the, yes. No, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm going to have one question for you, sir, and then I'm going to talk to Dr. Mannion because I have a passion for mental health. Very quickly, and just out of curiosity, I have your brief in your pre-budget consultations, and I certainly understand what your role is. Is your academy or your societies doing anything to encourage more women to be involved in the traditional STEM areas?
Thank you very much for the question. Indeed, we have focused on all aspects of the science, technology, innovation pipeline. I'm pleased to note that, in fact, one of our really important areas of research and science has been a study that we felt inspired pay issues and salary issues to be taken up quite seriously. Our work on women in university research, in fact, inspired McMaster to conduct its own study on a gender pay gap, resulting in a salary raise, actually, for full-time female faculty. But your question about STEM is itself quite relevant to my answer. The STEM report, Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math, with the phrase "no assembly, some assembly required," speaks to a very important issue, which I think you've already heard in responses already. One is that the shortage of STEM skills is a problem, but it is by no means the most important or only problem. In fact, creating the demand for these kinds of skills might be equally important. I can say in passing as well that I have two adult daughters that have gone through university systems, one of whom will go through in the humanities and one of whom will go through in the sciences because they've been given that opportunity to excel. I think we have the opportunity in Canada to do this, and the 3 academies that make up the Council of Canadian Academies, I think it's fair to say, are very committed to that proposition.
For Partners for Mental Health, I obviously have a great passion. I worked in the field for a long time. You know that. What I'm interested in, I read your submission from last year in preparation for today, and the $100 million fund was pitched last year to Finance Committee as well. You call it the Nuremberg model. Can you give me an idea of whether or not the model was scaled up from the localized pilot. And I'll tell you where I'm going. I'm
Yeah.
going to be very clear on it. You're moving as an organization from public policy and awareness to a very different model of then getting into giving out money and supporting. It is a large step. And my concern is, do you start smaller, like Nuremberg, and then scale it up around the country? So your comments on that would be grateful.
Question, but more importantly, thank you for the stance that you've taken very publicly on mental health. I've had the opportunity to hear you speak. Very impressive, but it's very bold on your part to do that. In terms of the Nuremberg model, it did start small, but now has stretched across Europe. The European Alliance has actually taken the initial pilot work, have adapted it, and now it's in hundreds of communities. So the step has been taken from a scientific perspective. The evidence is there. What's happening now is people are taking that evidence and applying it in context. That's what's being proposed now. Take what we have in terms of not just a fledgling piece of evidence, but now an applied, scaled piece of evidence on a different continent and apply it within the Canadian context. The timing is also critical from a policy perspective, and I say that because I've had partners, but myself as well, I've had many conversations with the Public Health Agency of Canada that's poised to talk about their own strategy around suicide prevention, with no implementation plan, no operationalization. Too often we come across with strategies with no implementation. Public is very tired of the rhetoric part of that and really poised for some action. If you look at a very small pilot in Canada, you don't necessarily have the power to demonstrate some of the heterogeneity required to demonstrate how it can be scalable to the different types of communities that exist across Canada. So what we've proposed is enough communities to have that variability so that we'd have the evidence available to then scale beyond that across the country. We think that's the way to go. And when I say we, I'm not referring to partners. I'm referring to the people that partners have brought together that have experience in youth suicide prevention, who have done a wealth of research and practice in their communities, in their provinces, to find out how can we best use the existing evidence and apply it in the Canadian context.
It's a complete ask in the $100 million. It's not something that you think we could start smaller and move across once you learn. You're confident the model and you want to implement it widely.
So I think to a certain extent there's some scalability. And what I mean by that is how many communities do you need to have to actually have that heterogeneity? I know that we've looked at different models. The minimum is probably 12 to 14 communities to be able to do that. So it's less than what we're proposing. But to be honest, how do you choose those 12 to 14 communities when the need is so great across the country? I think there's a political imperative as well in terms of how does the government do something that is very loud and clear in terms of we want to do something significant in this area. So the magnitude of the ask is actually the process of the ask, the magnitude of the ask will have an impact in and of itself. It will change the discourse, I think, nationally, and have the impact we're talking about.
Point of order, and you could have, so we'll give you another minute.
Oh, thank you very much. And I'm just going to continue on it. So you came out of, essentially, Mental Health Commission of Canada. You were part of it. Then you incorporated on your own. What's the relationship with the Mental Health Commission of Canada going forward?
So I know that we've been working on this for a number of years now. Several of us who live and breathe youth suicide, want to make a difference, have been working on this particular ask for several years, shared everything with the Mental Health Commission of Canada. This is going to take all of us, quite honestly, to get it right. It's so rewarding to see that the Commission has now looked at the same model that we're talking about, looking at it from a slightly different perspective, lifespan as opposed to youth. We believe that if you are going to start with something, have that first bite of the elephant, it should be children and youth, because that's where the greatest impact can be. Absolutely prepared to work with the Commission. I've had several conversations with the Commission. Some of their leads around the suicide prevention have approached me on multiple occasions. Their leads have changed, unfortunately, several times, so it's hard to find out exactly who the main person is. The group that we've brought together is poised to work with whomever is ready to make a difference in this area.
108 conversations last year. I thought that was really helpful across Canada. That started to talk about suicide prevention. I know a lot of us did that. Thank you.
Mr. Caron.
Yep.
7 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'll start with Mr. Baudouin. If I have a chance, I'll go back to Mr. Barnell after. I'm very glad to have you here, Mr. Baudouin, because we had you in the past. And we always talk about people having written a textbook on something, but you literally wrote textbooks on tax issues and tax in Canada. So it's really interesting to have you here. And one thing is that you always submitted information elements, proposals to think outside the box while still being credible, just forcing us to think in a different way, which I can see your proposal being as well. Je vais continuer en français si vous voulez bien.
I'll continue in French if you don't mind. One specific element, in fact, you support bringing down the cap the upper limit for TFSAs from 10,000 to 5,500. I'm sure you read the Parliamentary Budget Officer's report on TFSAs. He said it would cost tens of billions of dollars at the end of the day if the cap was not brought down, so down to 5,500. Because keeping all that money in TFSAs could represent 0.65% of GDP. Do you agree with the Parliamentary Budget Officer's conclusions?
I hope I got exactly what you were saying. Yes, I was very much opposed to increasing the limit on TFSAs from 5,500 to 10,000, largely on the basis that it would benefit mainly people in the very higher income groups. And when we're facing a situation where inequality of income and wealth are growing very rapidly, that didn't seem to me to be a very good use of tax dollars. Moreover, as an economist, TFSAs are not the only instrument for, not the only asset that you can buy whose returns are exempt. And I come back to the case of housing. To an economist, investing in housing is more or less the same as investing in a TFSA. And there's no restriction on investing in housing. So there's ample opportunity for people to invest in assets that have no, which bear no tax on their returns. So it didn't seem to me to be the purpose.
C'est un élément, je vais avoir plus d'informations là-dessus. Maintenant, je ne peux pas nécessairement passer sur l'ensemble.
Now, I can't go over every one of your suggestions in seven minutes, but there's a question I've asked on past committees, and I'll ask it of you as a tax expert. We often talk about the complexity of Canada's tax system, and you've made some proposals in your presentation which underscore the complexity, be it taxation on corporations or income taxes, that is, all of the elements of Canada's tax system. When I was elected in 2011, the Income Tax Act was 2,000 pages long. It's 3,000 pages long now. When the law was adopted in 1917, it was 10 pages in length. So in all those years, it's become very complex. So do you think it would be worthwhile to simplify Canada's tax system? And if so, where do we start? How do we get the ball rolling?
That's very difficult. Thank you very much for that question, which is a very challenging and a very difficult one, and I agree completely. The complexity of the tax system gives rise to opportunities for tax planning. And some of my proposals at least are motivated by removing opportunities from tax planning used in the pejorative sense perhaps of tax avoidance. For example, the suggestion that we might want to eliminate preferential taxation of capital gains is largely motivated by the fact that the capital gains exemption gives rise to a lot of tax planning. Not just stock options, but tax planning more generally, where people try to convert earnings into capital gains. Similarly, so I think base broadening on the one hand does tend to reduce complexity and it serves a basic purpose. On the other hand, complexity is in some sense hard to avoid. Whenever you put a special measure into the tax system for a particular purpose, for example, the small business deduction, which has got good reasons for existing to protect, to encourage small firms who are engaged in highly risky activities to take those risks and not punish them for doing it by taxing them at a high rate in the event that they're business is successful. So I'm a strong believer in the small business tax rate. But at the same time, you have to worry about the fact that people can take advantage of the small business tax rate who are not really engaged in risky enterprises. So, for example, I gave in my notes, I apologize for members of the committee who don't have a copy of my notes. I didn't get a chance to do them early enough to translate them. But one of the things that I was proposing in these notes was to reduce advantages that certain groups might have to take advantage of the small business deduction. For example, professionals incorporating mainly for the reason of paying a low business tax rate and holding their earnings there to avoid personal taxes. There have been some recent studies that have suggested that there is a large amount of tax leakage that occurs because of that. So I guess what I'm saying is that simplicity is one thing, but whenever you introduce measures which are designed to fulfill a particular purpose, they themselves give rise to complexities that you then have to turn around and try and close off.
Thank you very much. I have time for a quick question. Thank you. Very quickly, I'm new to this file. I'm actually a deputy critic for fisheries, oceans, and Coast Guard. I was looking at fish stocks around the world, and there are actually very detailed statistics, especially by species. It seems to be impossible to find in Canada. Am I wrong? Am I looking at the wrong place? Or should we have more detailed statistics on the current state of fish stocks, not only having category A, B, C, but really having a clearer picture?
You're referring more so around the sustainability of the stocks?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's information available certainly through the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. I'm not sure if it's fully up to date, but it's reasonably well kept up to date. I think the narrative around sustainable fisheries in Canada has changed a lot over the past generation, certainly going back to the days of the groundfish moratorium, and we were sort of iconically known, and not necessarily for positive reasons at the time. We are probably now recognized among global leaders around sustainability certification. So I mentioned earlier things like Marine Stewardship Council certification, third-party eco-labeling standards that are required for market access in places like the EU and the US, and here in Canada in particular. The vast majority of our fisheries today actually meet and exceed those standards. So we've come a long way, a tremendously long way, and we've advanced the social license quite well on that front. So I think it's a positive story.
Valero, 7 minutes.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to start off with Ian. This topic is touches a lot of people, touches a lot of lives. This week, I just happened to glance at one of the national newspapers, and there was an article about a remote Inuit town in northern Quebec where 3 teenagers in the last 8 weeks took their lives out of a population, I think, of about 2,500. So I don't know the answers. I'm here to listen. I'm here to help, facilitate, whatever the term you want to use. It's troubling in this day and age that you read about such a story of 3 individuals who are in the prime of their life and should have a bright future ahead of them. So, my general comment: what else can we do? What should we be doing? Because we're obviously not doing something to have.
Let me tell you another story about
please.
A northern community where they had suicides on a regular basis with 2 different cohorts. One were older teenagers, 17 and 18-year-olds. One were 10 and 11-year-olds. Every month they were losing members of their small community. This is several years ago. We were involved with this community in a whole community approach to wellness, identification of problems, supporting gatekeepers in that community. In that community, the suicides stopped. For several years, there were no suicides in that community. What that suggests to me is that even in the most difficult of circumstances, if you're willing to look at the problem in a different way, if you look at the capacity that already exists in a community, and you engage a community, not just in terms of what they're doing wrong, but what their wellness could be, you can see change happen. And they owned that change. It wasn't a bunch of researchers flying in, dropping in, and saving the day. It was working with the community to find a solution based on a whole community approach that allowed them to change the course of how that community was coping with whatever circumstances they had. There are enough of those stories that exist to suggest to me that we can actually make a difference, but we don't weave these stories together. We don't have any national strategy, national plan to implement with a way of evaluating so that one story in the one community could actually be replicated in the other community and the same kind of impact. I think what we're trying to propose is how do we help all those little communities, those larger communities, learn from what they have suffered through or what they have been able to overcome to help other communities at the same time. So rather than being overwhelmed by a problem which is, it's numbing when you think about the numbers and the impact, I prefer to think about where's the opportunity for us to do something different. And I've never seen a time in my entire career where the opportunity has been as great as right now in terms of the public willingness, the philanthropics willingness, government's willingness to actually do something bold and get it done.
Thank you. On to Robin. One of the reasons I ran and wanted to get into public service is I want a strong economy. I want a strong economy for my two young daughters who are 3 and 5, and I want a great future for them. I wasn't seeing that in the past government. I wasn't seeing that in their policies. But I'm one who believes in wealth creation. I think the tax system over the last number of years has become convoluted, complex, bureaucratic. I'd like to hear your top 2 or 3 recommendations on maybe some immediate steps or near-term steps we could take to simplify, other than a national review of $100 billion of tax expenditures, but we'll put that aside for now.
Thank you for your question, I think. Simplifying the tax system. Well, the general mantra that an economist would say, probably even an accountant and tax lawyer, would be that a simpler tax system is a tax system that has a broader base and doesn't have a lot of exemptions. For example, the GST is a relatively simple base with some exceptions, whereas the income tax is more complicated. A lot of the complications in the income tax system, and particularly also in the corporate tax system, come about because the way in which we treat capital income, I believe. And if we can simplify the way in which capital income is treated in the tax system, we could probably go a long way to putting tax planning professionals out of business, I would say. And I think that looking at things like the capital gains exemption is one place to start. And I think also I didn't want to get into this too much because it's a relatively technical subject, but the corporation income tax could also be simplified considerably by adopting a much simpler system that leads to less opportunities for profit shifting and changing the way in which you earn your profits and so on. These are difficult questions, but I think in the end, simplification of the tax system would increase the trust that members of the public have in it.
Thank you. How long do I have?
You're got a minute and a half.
Okay. Mr. Littler, question on the tariffs. Obviously, we live in a world where we have tariff and non-tariff barriers and price differential between U.S. Can you hear me?
Not very well.
Oh. We live in a world where we have tariff and non-tariff barriers, which leads to some price differential between the U.S. and Canada. How much, if you want to look with your members, how much of that difference are you seeing in price differentials? Putting aside the exchange rate movements in the last couple of years, but what benefit could we see to the Canadian economy and to Canadian consumers with an easing of tariffs?
The reasons for price differentials between Canada and the U.S. are many. Some of them are fairly straightforward economics of scale and population, that you would expect to see. Some of them are a rather perverse practice called country pricing, in which Canadians are charged either via a wholesaler or a distributor at a higher rate simply because the market will bear more in Canada. And the Senate actually spoke to this at length, and indeed then Minister Flaherty indicated that he was planning to address the issue in a budget, 2 budgets ago. I think it was 3 budgets ago. The challenge, of course, is how do you address that? Because you can't attach a penalty to the goods, or else you exacerbate the problem. And so, for a lot of entities that were charging Canadians more that don't have a permanent sort of establishment in Canada, it was exceedingly difficult to think about a way to address that. So that's been a big part of it. I mean, if you think about, you know, the retail pot is about $500 billion, but about $100 billion of that is auto that has, you know, very strictly kind of controlled environment. About $50 billion is gas station sales. We tend not to look at them in the same way. They tend to be vertically integrated companies. Everybody is tracking that pretty tightly. Of the rest, we have about $100 billion in grocery. So when you pare it all away, consumer goods, you're getting down into about the $220 billion zone. So when you think about $4.5 billion of tariffs, it is on average 2%, but of course it falls differentially from product to product, and in some cases actually outstrips all of the sales taxes, both federal and provincial, that are collected. So it's a disparate impact depending upon the item, and of course some items are exempt or have very low tariff rates. I don't know, would that address the question you're asking?
I'm going to have to cut just there in any event. Mr. Albas, 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses for coming here and giving us your viewpoints. I'm going to be specifically speaking to education, and I do appreciate, Ms. Robinson, you speaking to the members' earlier question in regards to apprenticeships. It was the previous government that actually made so that any bridge, like a new Champlain Bridge, or the shipbuilding contracts, would use Canadian apprentices. In fact, C-SPAN, I think of the 600 employees that they brought on to their Vancouver operations specifically for that, I believe 2/3 or so were just on apprentices, which I think is a great thing. Now, one area, there's a huge amount of support that governments right across this great country give to supporting students, so in terms of the Canada Student Loan Program, et cetera. Obviously, having apprentices being able to now qualify for the Canada Student Loan, I think is a great thing. I certainly heard in British Columbia, that's the voice I heard. Now, one area I don't think that we do a very good job, and I certainly want to offer, a suggestion and maybe hear your viewpoint, is in the United States, they actually have what's called the college scorecard. And what that does, have you heard of that, ma'am? Yeah, and for people that don't, it basically provides prospective students with comparison of costs and outcomes among similar programs and programs of preparation for students with similar backgrounds. So if I am, let's say, I might want to go to Okanagan College or BCIT in British Columbia to find institutions. I could actually go online if they were universities that receive federal funding in the United States, and actually compare a similar program. So if I was interested in a particular trade, I could see, okay, what are the costs, and they will also say what the graduation rate is, but also what the costs were, what the student debt was, and how many are employed. So just like when you buy a car, you expect to see some key indicators as to whether the car is gas efficient, et cetera. This gives you that. Do you think we suffer from that in Canada, of not giving students enough information so they can make informed choices about which trades or post-secondary education they take?
So much, Mr. Albas, for absolutely, I totally agree. Yes, we suffer from that problem. Are there solutions that you can come up with? Yes. Let's be cautious. These are shared jurisdiction issues. So the federal government can't act alone. But what you're proposing is my ultimate vision, a data dashboard. Guidance counselors, parents, students, employers who know. And these are, after all, publicly funded post-secondary institutions. Canada has 97 universities, publicly funded, 135 odd community colleges, polytechnics, institutes, publicly funded through federal transfer dollars and provincial funding. Why does the citizen, the learner, the employer not have accessible, reliable, real-time labor market data? Currently, Statistics Canada, as much as we believe in Statistics Canada and delighted that the census is back, takes 4 to 5 years to polish any data. Today on apprenticeship, we are coming up with policy solutions based on data culled in 2002. As a key proponent of the Canada Apprentice Loan, I think it's very easy. Every time the federal government issues an incentive grant, a completion grant, why don't we have a student identifier number? Why? We know nothing about the pathways of our publicly supported learners.
Well, and again, with the Canada Job Grant, and in fact, actually, Statistics Canada, I believe, launched 2 new labour market surveys last year. But I do appreciate it does take time for the proper data to be not only gathered but also disseminated. I just think that there's a real dearth of information to help empower students. And I think there would also be greater competition and accountability, I think, among post-secondary choices, because as our demographics age, those students, should be given as much information so that they can get the highest quality of life and be able to pay those higher taxes that go along with it. Which I think is a good thing. When you make a lot of more money, then you share and help grow our economy. So now getting over to Mr. Bodway, I just wanted to ask you the question. You mentioned earlier about the Canadian healthcare transfer and somehow that the federal government should automatically pay whatever the the rate of growth is in a province. Is that correct? Okay. Well, in British Columbia, we have the lowest per capita healthcare costs. We have the highest life expectancy. We have the lowest infant mortality rate per 1,000 live births, lowest cancer mortality rates per 100,000, and lowest diseases of heart rate mortality rate. So they offer, a lot of services that aren't in other provinces, yet they are able efficiently to deliver those services. To me, I think one of the things, if we expect better of our healthcare systems, simply just suggesting that we give more money, I think actually creates a perverse incentive where provinces that have done a good job of growing their economy, but also keeping their services like healthcare affordable at such a high level, to me, I said it gives a bit of a perverse incentive. Would you agree with that?
I think it's easy to overestimate thank you for the question, I should say, but I think it's easy to overestimate the incentive consequences of general transfers like the Canada Social Transfer, the Canada Health Transfer, because they're unconditional and they're not contingent on what any one province does. How you use those transfers in your province or how your provincial government uses them is entirely up to them. I could see an argument for conditioning the transfers on demographic differences across provinces, where provinces that have, for example, older populations have more need for money. But in terms of the incentives that provinces get from unconditional transfers that are formula-based and based on nationwide averages, I think that the incentives are rather minimal. My concern is really the balance between federal revenue and transfers and provincial revenue and transfers. And there's a purpose for having a vertical balance, a vertical gap in a federation, which we can see nowadays and which they don't have in Europe. It fulfills a very important insurance function for the federation. When provinces are subject to shocks, the fiscal federalism system automatically accommodates those shocks by changes in the transfer system. And that would be lost if you insisted on all provinces relying on their own revenues to finance all of their programs.
Caught you there. We went considerably over, but I thought it was a discussion that needed to be had. Mr. McKinnon, 5 minutes. Not a problem.
Monsieur Littler, je vais y aller en français si je peux.
I will ask my question in French. I have merchants in my riding, so retailers or merchants in my riding who tell me that online shopping abroad, mostly in the United States, they can enter into the country purchases for under $20 tax-free or duty-free. And these retailers are afraid that the government will either maintain or increase that $20 cap. Could you perhaps tell us a little bit more about how your members feel about online shopping abroad?
Some of our members would probably carry sharpened steaks and garlic and so on. It's a hard file to kill. And the issue is not, for us at least, online shopping. We're prepared to compete, and indeed you know, our top 10 members' online sales match Amazon and eBay sales, eBay also being a member. But so we're happy to compete. What worries us about de minimis, and there's a lobby currently, there was a lobby during the TPP negotiations, there's a lobby currently from the U.S. air freight industry and from online warehouses both in the U.S. and abroad to dramatically increase de minimis. Initially, the ask, I think, was $200. And they point out that that's the U.S. level, and they kind of joke that Canada's at the same level as, I think, Uganda. What they do also fail to point out is that there's no federal sales tax in the United States, so it works rather differently going the other way. And, of course, they also have a lot of the warehouses there. So you can intuit reasonably who would lose sales, those investing and hiring in Canada, and who would gain sales, those shipping from outside. The problem is that if de minimis were raised, that strips out the tax and the duty at the border. So somebody selling a good for $100 in your riding would have to collect QST and and HST. Somebody shipping it in from Albuquerque, there's no tax. So it's a basic tax fairness issue, and that's we can live with the $20. Nobody wants to tax paper clips. It's not worth anybody's time. But $200 represents a lot of consumer goods. We estimate up to $80 billion. Not all of those are shippable. Obviously, not all of those would be diverted. But we are very worried that if de minimis were increased significantly, it would lead to massive cross-border online shopping from the comfort of people's living rooms, and that is a source of great concern to Canadian merchants.
And to say nothing of our merchants losing sales and tax revenues. Yeah.
Yeah, provincial and federal tax revenue, of course.
Exactly. Turning to Mr. Beaudoin with the time I have, Professor Beaudoin with the time I have left, this government and hopefully this committee, Mr. Chairman, will take up the issue of reviewing some of what Mr. Sorbara, I think, was referring to in terms of tax exemptions and their efficacy with respect to favoring one income group over another disproportionately. And so my question is much the same as Mr. Sorbara, and perhaps we'll have another occasion to explore this with you more fully. But do you have advice for this committee as we take that particular task up?
Thank you for the question. You're not talking about simplicity now, you're talking about fairness.
Well, both.
Both, yeah. Well, I made one or two proposals that were kind of addressing this issue obliquely. And one of them had to do with taking all non-refundable tax credits, personal credit, spousal credit, age credit, dependents, so on, and turning them into refundable credits. And there's no reason in principle why you couldn't do that. And if you turn them into refundable credits, you could also run them through the tax system the same way as the GST credit, the HST, the child tax credit, the guaranteed income supplement are run through. Make them contingent on income so that they diminish as you go up the income distribution. So you could have, a set of refundable tax credits that are very fair. They go to the people that need them most, and it would be consistent. There's no consistency now between non-refundable tax credits, which came from a period in the 1980s when we converted deductions to credits and so on, and refundable tax credits, which were introduced with the GST at the end of the 1980s and have become one of the potentially most important policy instruments in the tax system that we should exploit. So that's an example of what I'm saying.
Very good. Thank you very much.
We will have to cut it there. Turning to Mr. Leipert.
Thank you. I'll start with Mr. Beaudoin. We had the C.D. Howe Institute here this morning, and the results of a lot of work that they have done in the way of studies concluded that our upper income tax brackets, we have reached the maximum. You, if I heard you correctly, believe there's still room in those upper tax brackets for increases. Is that a personal opinion, or is that as a result of some studies?
Well, it depends what you mean. Thank you for the question. It depends what you mean by tax increases. You can get a tax increase out of top income people by raising the rate, or you can get a tax increase by broadening the base. And I have stronger views about broadening the base than I do about increasing the rate. And I think there's plenty of room for broadening the base at the top income level. For example,
Go ahead.
no, that was my proposal for reducing the preferential treatment of capital gains, was essentially to broaden the base and get more revenue from people who are converting other forms of income into capital gains simply in order to get a tax deduction.
Okay, but whatever term you put on it, it's an increase in taxes paid by those at the upper income level. And as a follow-up to that, again, work that the C.D. Howe Institute had done seemed to indicate that if we push this much further, we're running the risk of having a brain drain of the country, because there are other countries in the world that have more generous tax structures for higher income. How is it that if we start to lose these folks who are paying a significant amount of tax, and all of a sudden we don't have them paying, they're not here anymore and they're paying zero tax, how does that impact positively the federal bottom line? I have trouble understanding that.
Thank you for the question. It's certainly a constraint on raising taxes that you reduce the base, that you get people to leave the country, go from one province to the other. There's not a whole lot of evidence about the responsiveness of raising the rate in terms of international migration. There are a lot of other things that influence international migration besides the top marginal tax rate. After all, the top marginal tax rate only applies to a small part of income that the person is earning. But I accept your point. There is a possibility that, and one has to weigh the possible erosion of the base as a result of people fleeing the country when you raise the top rate, versus the fact that a lot of income that people get at the top is a result of luck rather than, some of it's a result of luck rather than hard work. And I think capital gains partly fit into that category. For example, capital gains on housing.
To ask one other question, because you did mention on the TFSA, obviously we have a disagreement on whether increases in the TFSA was the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do, but I wanted to prod a little bit more on your example. Would you say that it is possible over a 5-year period that if someone invested their life savings into a home, and through no fault of their own, they made all the right decisions, but 5 years later that house could actually be worth less money than what they paid for it? Now, if you have a TFSA and you went to a guaranteed income in that TFSA, that 5 years later, is there any chance that it could be worth less money than what you put into it?
Yes.
How?
You take a capital loss on the asset that you...
No, I said you put it into a guaranteed income, GIC.
No.
So I think your comparison between your justification on a TFSA saying that investment in a house price, or investment in a home, is comparable investment to a TFSA, I don't think holds. I will have one more question, if I could, to... I will. The Retail Council of Canada. Do you have a position on carbon tax?
No, we don't have a developed one. We do a fair bit of work in the area of environmental responsibility, but it's some distance from us, although obviously it affects us. We've tended to look to views from large final emitters and from environmental specialists, so we don't have much to say on it.
Mr. Ouellette, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I really like to just go back to the idea that I really liked from Mr. Ian Marion, the partner for mental health. It was not just that academics that come in and save the day, but it was the community. And I believe any durable solution, it must often come from the community. And I really liked what you said there. But the question I'm actually going to direct at is the Retail Council and Carl Littler. And the reason is, have you given thought to any different types of solution? Is regulation the only way versus with credit cards about the rates that are charged? because for me, the main problem in any market is the eventual centralization, which leads to monopoly, and more monopoly, and in the case of Visa and MasterCard, perhaps a duopoly where there's very little competition and retailers don't have a choice. And why not challenge the structure and use new technology and innovate a collective solution? Because we've heard over the course of the week from multiple groups, small business owners, Small Business Federation, about the same issues related to the credit cards. And why not innovate a solution, a collective solution to your own problem?
So, I mean, we are strong believers that this industry needs to be regulated, and part of that is the way that the ultimate beneficiaries of interchange are the banks, and to some limited degree cardholders, although the banks are the primary beneficiaries. But they don't negotiate on their own behalf. They basically have cutouts, which are the networks that set the rate for what the banks receive. So there's only two to deal with, and one of them has almost 70% of the market. So you can read into that what you will. But on your broader point, we agree. The trouble is on the technology side, it's kind of the Tower of Babel. There's a lot of different solutions out there, and a number of entities are looking to say we can cut out some of those those price takers along the way. Of course, some of them are the very same entities because the investors in these may be financial services firms. I think there is some possibility down the line, particularly if you have decent digital identification and authorization, to do much more direct transfers without a lot of intermediaries, but people aren't there yet.
I just think you have this opportunity because you have a large group of individuals and companies that you support and you represent, and you could innovate and push innovation in a different direction and challenge a lot of the structures in society and use technology to challenge those structures. And then I just have one final thing, if I may, Chair, is I know it sounds rather, it's from Nobina Robinson from the Polytechnic in universities. I was just wondering, it seems rather pell-mell, or the way that we collect data between the needs of jobs, the requirements, and the training that goes on in universities, colleges. And even though I was a university academic, I sometimes failed to understand where we're getting market data. And so when I was in the military, we knew exactly what we needed. We knew that this trade was red line, this trade was yellow, this trade was green, and we knew how many people we needed and how we'd get them trained in order to get the number of people, and how we would recruit people. And I don't feel there's much coordination going on. I don't think there's actually enough information collected perhaps by Stats Canada.
Sir, you're absolutely right. You would know, just wanted to clarify, you would know Red River College. And Red River College is our member. We're not publicly funded universities. We're the college and polytechnics, just to clarify that. I totally agree with you. And yet, what I would say is that every one of these higher education institutions are servicing so much data. You can't go and get the provincial operating grant at Red River College unless you have data on enrollment, how many students you accepted, how many you turned away. You have this data. It's publicly available. It's not available nationally. So I do believe that the federal government can ask and work in this new atmosphere of jurisdictional harmony with the provinces through the Forum of Labour Market Ministers, through the newly created Labour Market Information Council, to say, in addition to Good Statistics Canada data, why don't we have everybody using what's already there? We don't need to invent it. We just need to be able to get at it. So I'd go to the 80-20 rule. If you try to get 100% perfect data, we'll never get there. But let's get publicly funded higher education institutions, and in this I include the universities, to get their data out in public. And the federal government can do that. It is trying through Employment Social Development Canada. I encourage you to keep pushing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Ouellette. Just before we adjourn this session, a point, Mr. Bonnell, with you, and I just don't believe people understand the urgency of the crisis facing the fish processing industry, especially lobster, over labor shortages and the difficulties caused by the Temporary Foreign Workers Program. I'm told by several fish processors that if they cannot access foreign labor within the next 6 weeks, that what some of them will start to do will be bring the fish in, quick freeze the fish, put them in containers, ship them to a low-wage labor market, and bring the processed product back. That'll not do anything for our economy or our job market. Is the crisis that serious?
Certainly in the case of the lobster sector, I would say absolutely yes. I mean, it's a missed opportunity. It's a tremendously valuable industry, worth well over $1 billion. Productivity is at an all-time high in the industry right now. Prices for lobster, both into the U.S. and going into Asia, is tremendous. But the labor issue is a real issue. It's a massive issue. It's not going to get better. Not in terms of sourcing locally available labor. It's not going to get better. You've got really 2 or 3 key solutions, right? Technology and automation is part of the solution, but that's a medium to long-term strategy. The immediate solution, in my view, certainly no doubt, relates to the availability of temporary foreign workers, without a doubt. Tremendous lost opportunity without it, certainly in my opinion.
Thank you, and with that, we will. I'll thank, on behalf of the committee, all the witnesses and the valuable information they provided. We will. So thank you again. We'll switch up to the next series of witnesses and start within a couple of minutes. Thank you very much. to order, and as I explained before, pursuant to Standing Order 108.2, we're doing this is our second segment of our 8th meeting for pre-budget consultations 2016. Just for the committee members' interests, before we start, on Tuesday, the Minister's office has now notified us that the Minister and the Deputy Minister will appear before committee between 11:30 and 12:30 in room 237 across the hall on Tuesday. Officials will be with us from 12:30 to 1:30. And if committee members, we talked earlier this morning on the iPads and accessing the information on your iPad, briefs and so on the paperless technology. If anybody wants to get up to speed on how to do that, we'll be doing that from 11 to 11:30 because we've that space booked in any event. So that's up to you whether you want to come or not. So with that, we'll turn to the witnesses. Thank you for coming. I know Jerry Diaz just got off a plane and barely got here. So we'll start with the Canadian Association of Oil Well Drilling Contractors, Mr. Schultz.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to appear before the House of Commons Finance Committee. Your job is to recommend to the government measures that will strengthen the economy. I can do that for you in 2 sentences. We want a government who will defend and promote Canada's oil and gas industry, an environmental leader compared to any other major producer in the world. And secondly, we expect government to champion pipelines. Earlier this week, our association launched Oil Respect, a campaign to provide regular Canadians an opportunity to stand up and demand respect for Canada's oil and gas industry. We launched this campaign because we were tired of the misinformation, half-truth spread by foreign celebrities, radical environmentalists, and grandstanding politicians who twist the facts about our industry. Oil Respect is about respect for facts, respect for workers, and respect for their families, respect for the environment, and respect for an industry that has contributed greatly to giving Canada some of the highest living standards in the world. So what are the facts? Canada's oil and gas industry meets what are now the highest and toughest environmental standards of large producing nations in the world. It employs 500,000 Canadians, is the largest private sector investor in Canada, and contributes $17 billion per year to support Canadian social programs. In 2015, the industry lost $60 billion in revenue, equivalent to losing the entire auto sector from the Canadian economy in just 1 year. The industry is accustomed to the ups and downs of commodity prices. We know that occasionally we will go through periods of low prices, job losses, and consolidation. In this latest downturn, according to Statistics Canada, we have lost 100,000 oil and gas jobs. It's the worst downturn since the 1980s. Oil workers aren't just losing their jobs, families are losing their homes, and businesses are going bankrupt. But understand that in spite of this hardship, our industry is not looking for a government handout. We are asking for an honest discussion by our political leadership. Oil Respect is about federal leadership that stands up and fights for oil workers, and we will call out politicians who take revenues while denying the industry that produces them. According to the International Energy Agency, global demand for energy is expected to increase by 37% by 2040, and fossil fuels will make up 75% of the energy mix. The world does not need Canadian oil and gas. The world just needs oil and gas. We need the federal government to advocate for Canadian oil and gas workers, companies, and pipelines already meeting much higher environmental standards than those imposed anywhere in the world. Otherwise, they will allow the critics to crush our industry, opening the door to the United States, Russia, Iran, and Saudi Arabia to supply the world's energy demands, countries with much lower environmental, labor, safety, and human rights standards. That makes absolutely no sense. Without pipelines for export, Canadian products receive far less than world price and results in fewer jobs, lower profits, and diminished government revenues to support Canadians. It means Canadians continue to subsidize American consumers. We need federal leadership to champion national pipeline projects because they are in the national interest of all Canadians. If we care about the facts, jobs, in our economy, we need our elected representatives to fight for pipelines, something we see consistently from Premiers Wall and Gallant. We also believe oil and gas families and businesses need respect. They are hurting right now, and they rightfully believe their federal government should stand up for them. We expect our government to have an honest discussion about the great benefits of Canada's oil and gas industry, especially when they're only too happy to receive the revenues it produces. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Schultz. Turning to Ms. Gamblin with the Salome mission. I might not have that pronounced right. Go ahead.
Yes, you did. Salome mission. Thank you. So my name is Vanessa Gamblin. I'm a Cree woman of Cross Lake, Manitoba. I also am the manager of Silo Mission's drop-in and emergency homeless shelter. So with that, I'm here, of course, to thank you, Member of Parliament, who welcome us here, and also, of course, Mr. Falconeau-Lett for bringing us here. We're very grateful to his honor. So what we would like to do is to identify that this past fall, no less than 20 agencies embarked on the first ever street census in Winnipeg core area. The goal was to get comprehensive view of homelessness in the city. The census found that there was 1,400 people who were experiencing homelessness in Winnipeg at that time. Keep in mind that those are just the people who were actually able to count. It did not take into account the number of people who may have been couch surfing and that evening. And who also may have been wandering the streets in other parts of town or who have been taking shelter in places that were not visible. It's safe to say that numbers could be close to about 2,000. Meanwhile, at Silo Mission, where I work, there's other troubling numbers that we'd like to share with you. So pretty much on any given day, we're serving anywhere from 1,500 to sometimes 1,700 meals per day. And we're providing at all times, pretty much every day, 110 emergency shelter beds. And so what happens, though, the unfortunate numbers for this too, is that I'm turning away anywhere from 15 to 60 people per day as also. So when I have lines full of gentlemen who are starving or gentlemen who are coming out of businesses that went bankrupt, families that are crisis highly with child welfare system, people who are challenged by the mental health systems, the justice systems, we are then turning them back into the streets, which is then a concern for us because then they also form other patterns of behaviors which could become then negative. So what's happening is they do not have a safe place to sleep. And so there's other agencies and shelters that are supporting, but they too are having to turn away, we're finding. So with some of this is we're trying to figure out ways and create new techniques to ensure that there is more access to programs and such. So we're showing that there's evidence of the people that we serve and that it mirrors pretty much a good portion of what we see when it comes to strains on our health and justice system. And that while we looked after people from all walks of life, including different races, the religions, sexual orientations, close to 70% of these people were serving themselves first and foremost. And they were are pretending or identifying to be Indigenous. So that's a real concern for us. Many of them are coming out of the child welfare system, as I noted before, and from remote communities, especially reserves, we're finding. So many of those people come to us experiencing physical, mental, and emotional health issues, and including addictions, and a lot of vicarious trauma. So daily, when they're within their own systems, if they're in their own environments, we're seeing that they're going from shelter to shelter or daily life experiences of addictions or mental health issues. They too are seeing yours and yours and yours and yours individually of other issues. So it's compacting. So there's more and more barriers. So with that, we're talking about that we're needing more opportunity to explore seeking resources around mental health. So when people enter our doors, we're seeing there's not enough mental health support. It's a very lacking system because of the systematic issues. So when we have community members who are homeless and they're coming in our doors and they're saying, I'm hungry. First word is generally the place, so we support them with that. Then they say they want clothing, we support that as well. Then they say to us, my feet are frozen and my toes are going to fall off. and they're scared to take off their socks. Our clinic, she goes and supports that and does what she can. She too has identified that about 80% of the individuals she's been communicating with are too identifying that they too need mental health support. So they're looking at their emotional needs are not being met when they're coming through our doors. So what we do is we created an interdependent sort of system within our own organization, which is primarily funded by donors. We do get some support from the government, so thank you for that. And then also we have a lot of support through volunteer services. Our community is beautiful in Winnipeg, and we're so grateful to that. So what they do is they bring that in. Although, again, we're speaking to is that there's a lack of programs. And then when we go back into the census, when we review some of this stuff, there's things such as talking about the recommendations with some of the principles for addressing homelessness was just having an Indigenous-led solutions would be wonderful, because some of the community members we had about 71.1% of the population that identified that night being Indigenous, also identifying that it was a challenge to communicate with those that were not as educated or self-experienced. So some of those are missing in those links, so we're trying to review some of that.
Can you sum up fairly quickly?
Yes, sorry. So we'd like to look at how could the government support in funding and supporting more access for more beneficial programs and dedicated to more mental health workers. Yes, that's pretty much it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I don't know if you're here or not, but we had a mental health discussion just in the previous panel as well. And we've had some throughout the week on the seriousness of mental health. Turning then to the U15 group of Canadian Research Universities, Mr. Hamdulapar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Ferdinand Hamdulapar, and thank you for the opportunity to appear before the committee. As chair of the U15, I'm here representing the group of Canada's research-intensive universities from across the country. I'm also president and vice chancellor of the University of Waterloo. Bonjour et merci de me donner l'occasion de me présenter.
Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to appear before the committee. As the chair of the U15, I'm here representing the group of Canada's research-intensive universities from across the country. I'm also the president and vice chancellor of the University of Waterloo.
Sense of the scale of the U15, our 15 universities educate nearly 585,000 students and perform $8.5 billion in research annually. That represents more than a quarter of all research, academic, non-academic, all research in Canada. This combination of teaching and research makes Canada's research-intensive universities a platform on which many of our country's competitive advantages are built. Research universities produce groundbreaking discoveries, are training sites for top research and innovation leaders for all sectors of the economy. They help attract and retain leading global talent and contribute expertise to a wide range of commercial and social endeavors. Fueled by discovery-driven research excellence, U15 institutions produce expertise that drives innovative Canadian businesses, informs public policy, and develops sustainable approaches that address our most pressing issues, from climate change to Indigenous relations to natural resource development and clean technologies. To ensure that Canada remains globally competitive with regard to innovation, we need to build on the foundations of research excellence. To this end, the U15 has two strategic and concrete suggestions for investment. First, research investments from Canada's 3 granting councils are the backbone of Canada's research excellence. These investments support discovery-driven research, university-industry research partnerships, recruiting and retaining world-class researchers, and training Canada's next generation of leaders. Since 2007, inflation has eroded federal funding to the Tri-Councils by $176 million. To ensure that Canada's research excellence platform continues to support our innovation ecosystem, we propose that the government commit to increasing Tri-Council and Research Support Fund funding to their inflation-adjusted 2007-2008 levels over the next 4 years, and commit to indexing this funding moving forward. The post-secondary sector is well poised to stimulate our economy with efficient and effective infrastructure upgrades. Our second proposal is to invest in Canada's research infrastructure through the innovative Campus Infrastructure Program. College and university campuses across the country have a wide range of infrastructure needs and upgrades that could improve health and safety, energy efficiency, and our capacity to undertake leading-edge research. We surveyed our 15 universities this year and found an estimated $3.7 billion in shovel-ready on-campus projects, ranging from renewing and expanding teaching laboratories, art centers, and libraries to upgrading heating systems, waste management systems, and on-campus lighting to improve energy efficiency. These projects have well-defined parameters and can be implemented in a timely fashion. These investments will improve Canada's capacity for groundbreaking research and strengthen our robust research environment, allowing Canada to attract and retain top talent, build strong research clusters, and foster the culture of innovation we need to prosper in a sustainable way. I kept my remarks fairly brief in the interest of time, but I will be happy to answer your questions later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Turning to the National President of Unifor, Mr. Das.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you very much for having our organization, which represents 315,000 workers from coast to coast to coast. Thank you very much for this opportunity. My remarks will focus on two key aspects of our submission: the urgent need for infrastructure spending and investment support for key industries, key strategic industries. Public sector spending is a vital part of Canadian prosperity, and through our social programs and safety net, our Canadian identity. Canada's social and physical infrastructure has suffered years of neglect and needs strengthening. Public investment in everything from childcare and education to social housing and retirement security has a proven track record of alleviating poverty and widening opportunity. Some estimates put Canada's physical infrastructure debt, a deficit, in the tens of billions of dollars, while others estimated running into the hundreds of billions of dollars. Either way, if Canada is going to make the transition to a green economy, and if the growth process is to resume, the federal government must play an active role in encouraging innovation, sustainable investment, and clean technology. Annual budgetary deficits of $25 billion over 4 years would leave Canada's debt-to-GDP ratio unchanged at roughly 31%. The debt-to-GDP ratio among the G7 is more than double that of Canada, which is why Unifor believes that even more federal government spending on social and physical infrastructure is fiscally justified. Unifor recommends the federal government significantly increase its infrastructure spending program. The timeline for infrastructure spending should be expedited in order to provide much-needed stimulus. Aspects of that program should include provisions for made-in-Canada materials and inputs, including sustainable building materials. Local hiring requirements, especially among vulnerable communities. For example, minorities, young workers, women in skilled trades, and Aboriginal workers. The removal of any prerequisite for private sector involvement as a condition for federal funding support. And steps to improve accessible transportation for Canadians with disabilities. A common thread amongst Canada's diverse advanced manufacturing industries over the past decade has been the near-complete absence of federal leadership, and this at a time when more than 450,000 manufacturing jobs were lost, nearly 1/4 of Canada's industrial base. Unifor calls for a national strategy in key areas of advanced manufacturing that would nurture Canadian production, foster international competitiveness, and secure future prosperity. In auto, assembly, and parts, Unifor recommends better integrating of the federal and provincial investment attraction efforts, including the development of a one-stop system to win new investment in Canadian assembly and parts plants. Canada's investment incentives must be competitive and efficient, with flexible rules and procedure and sensible fiscal and tax features. Export Development Canada's top priority must be attracting and supporting investments in Canadian-based, not foreign factories. The fact that Export Development loaned Volkswagen $526 million to invest in their Mexican facilities in no way enhances Canadian jobs. And the federal government should take a cautious approach to the Trans-Pacific Partnership with the understanding that major defects in the agreement will need to be renegotiated. The fact that the tariffs come off Japanese cars in 5 years, yet it doesn't come off until 25 and 30 years in the United States, is a disaster for the industry. When the presidents of Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler here in Canada say to Minister Freeland that it is a bad deal for the auto industry, then I would suggest this isn't scaremongering on behalf of Unifor. These are people that create over, if you look at the direct and indirect jobs in Ontario, almost 500,000 jobs. In aerospace, Unifor recommends using government research and development and investment support to ensure that key product development programs and production are undertaken in Canada. The Canadian content spin-off benefits and production offsets arising from procurement of military and civilian aircraft should be maximized. Under the C-35 deal, we really got away from the historical way that we've done business as we deal with regional offsets. I would suggest to you the history and the premise of regional offsets. It's why we have such a strong sector here in Canada, everywhere from IMP on the East Coast to Cascade on the West Coast. Unifor also recommends providing support to anchor firms such as Bombardier to ensure stability while major programs are successfully brought to market. I'm listening to those that say the government should not invest in Bombardier. The argument that somehow we have invested $2 billion in Bombardier over the last 50 years and they've only paid back $500 million in royalties. Nobody talks about the fact that last year alone, Bombardier paid $700 million in income tax and the workers paid $600 million. Nobody talks about the fact that in 30 years, Bombardier alone has paid $17 billion in taxes, yet alone the billions more paid by the employee. So I would suggest, if we are going to talk about an economy that includes strong manufacturing jobs, then you have to invest as a nation.
If you could sum up fairly quickly.
I will be very quick. Natural resources, a multi-dimensional strategy in key industries such as oil and gas, mining and forestry that would manage Canada's abundant resource wealth in a socially inclusive and ecologically responsible manner. Such a strategy would be to deepen linkages between extraction, domestic upgrading, and consumption, thus maximizing the economic benefits to Canada. And I have much more to say, but hopefully I'll have the opportunity to say it during questions. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Diaz, and your forthrightness. Turning to Villa Rosa Incorporated, and I may have this name wrong, Ms. Pedlasky.
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you for having me here today. I'm Mary Pedlasky. I'm here as a board member from Villa Rosa Incorporated in Winnipeg. It's a nonprofit organization acting as a convalescence home for unwed mothers. It's been around since the late 1800s, serving women who may live there while they choose to parent or to place their child for adoption. But it will help to explain a little on how I became involved with them. I grew up in suburban Winnipeg in a middle-class family with 2 parents. I was an A+ student, but somehow things didn't go as planned, and I ended up as a ward of Child and Family Services by the time I was 14. I lived in group homes until I was 16, and I rented my first apartment shortly after on a program called Independent Living. But it was when I moved into a group home that things really took a turn. If I was not behaving well beforehand, It jumped to an entirely new level when I was mixed with others who had had a worse upbringing than my own. My marks in school plummeted, and my experimentation with substances extended to a place that could have ended my life on more than one occasion. I felt I had not much to live for and struggled with the fact that I knew the people that worked where I lived got to go home to a very different life at the end of the day. Despite this, I always had an interest in the arts, dance specifically. One summer, I attended a work experience program through the YMCA, and it was recommended from one of the workers. I made $700, and I saved every penny. I went to the Royal Winnipeg Ballet School on registration day, and I lied about my past experience. I registered for the most classes a person could register for in a week for the entire next year, but I came short in my funds. I'm still not entirely sure how this happened, but somehow Child and Family Services teamed together with my parents and each came up with another $700 to pay for my tuition. The teachers very quickly learned that I had little experience, but I worked really hard. I wanted it badly, and by the end of the year, I had acquired a scholarship to continue my studies. I was able to become a leader to my peers, and my teachers taught me to leave my problems outside the door. I think without a strong connection to family, there will always be challenges, but I don't think it has to be your biological one. Dance was like that family that always welcomed me back. Eventually, I left Winnipeg to dance professionally elsewhere, and I did so for a time, but some of these unhealthy behaviors crept back, and I needed to go back to Winnipeg. I found out I was pregnant the day I returned and tried to live with my family, but it was not a healthy situation. Someone had recommended Villa Rosa, and I applied, and it must have been the next day or two when I moved in. The first parts were somewhat of a blur, but some of the things I gained from being there were I had been afraid to find out how many credits I needed to graduate. I only needed 2. They helped me with that, and I graduated high school. I bonded with a roommate who had a similar situation that I did. I ate healthy food. I learned parenting skills, and I feel I learned the best practices for raising my child, who is now 13. Consistently, I had this help, and Villa was always there for me, and I still feel that support today. After this, I had to navigate through welfare systems, low-income housing, subsidized daycare programs, and being in that situation, I did feel it was somewhat degrading, as there is a stigma involved that people on welfare, maybe they abuse the system. Why should we give them money? I work hard. They should too. There is not a lot of incentive for a person to be able to get off, and I was someone who always had a job while I was on social assistance, but much of my money was given back to them. One year I made $8,000 for myself and my son, so it's hard for me to imagine that a person would abuse a system like that, because that's almost not even possible. At one point, I received an amazing job offer teaching dance through one of our school divisions, but I was unable to find the daycare that I needed with the schedule the job was offering. So at the time, I was not living at Villa Rosa anymore, but I still had support. And one of these workers was trying to help me find ways to get more training and further things. We found that in the same building as the Employment and Assistance building that there was, across the hall in a Service Canada building, there was a program that I could apply for to further my training, which I did. And I was able to acquire much more employment that eventually I taught and got myself out of poverty. But I found it odd that one side of the building would have no idea what's going on the other side of the building. I've been on faculty at the Royal Winnipeg Ballet School. I've been a fully certified Stott Pilates instructor. Much of my training has come from the support of the government and people who have worked in those programs. Today I'm a realtor, and I have been selling homes for 7 years, and I focus on how I can help another person. Many months are quiet, and I've learned to keep busy through volunteer work, and I've always wanted to give back, so someone at Villa Rosa suggested that I applied, and that's how I became to be a board member there, and I am so glad I did. I'm in a leadership program through the Chamber of Commerce, and we're learning about many of the amazing inner workings of our city. If these programs hadn't existed and someone hadn't believed in me, I wouldn't be contributing to society today. I'm not even sure I would be alive. I'm so glad that you've let me share my story today. I hope that this may help some other families, that I can be somewhat of a voice for them. I feel that a strong bond, a strong connection to each other creates a healthy society, and I wonder if we can start by fixing the person while they are still in the womb. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Podlaski, and congratulations to you. Turning to WestJet Airlines Limited, Mr. Gibbons.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Let me begin by thanking members of the committee for the invitation to appear today. We encourage all parliamentarians to take an interest in commercial aviation, given how critically important it is to our communities from coast to coast to coast. There are some issues this committee can assist with in Budget 2016, and I will get to that. But firstly, I would like to provide a bit of an overview of our growth and investments and the challenges we face in 2016. On February 29th, we will proudly be celebrating our 20th anniversary of operations. On that day, 20 years ago, our route map consisted of 3 airplanes and 5 cities. We had roughly 200 employees, all of them taking a chance by coming to work for this small Western startup airline. At our headquarters in Calgary is a wall that lists all of the airlines in Canada that have gone bankrupt. It's a big wall. In fact, the average lifespan of an airline in Canada created after 1990 is 3.5 years. Not only did we buck that trend, we have flourished to the benefit of Canadians. In 1996, only 16% of Canadians took a flight on an annual basis. Today, that number is over 35. Our record of market stimulation has been profound. Today, our numbers are a tad improved. At nearly 12,000 employees, 600 flights a day, in 2015, we flew over 20 million guests for the first time. Our fleet consists of approximately 145 aircraft, ranging from Bombardier Q400s, manufactured at Downsview in Toronto, to Boeing 737s, to our new wide-body 767s, which will begin service to London Gatwick this May from 5 Canadian cities, including Winnipeg, which I note because it will be that city's first transatlantic flight since 2008. This is the kind of critical connectivity we are bringing to Canadian communities. Given that we're discussing the upcoming federal budget, I would like to comment on the current challenge we face as an Alberta-based airline. We have felt the effect of a softened demand and sluggish economy. About 25% of our entire system capacity originates in Alberta, and over 40% of our overall system capacity touches Alberta. This led in January to a temporary shifting of some of our capacity from the west to central and eastern Canada. Overall, our growth will continue this year with new services and new destinations, but we are closely monitoring the situation in our home province. We continue to take costs out of our system. This is a major challenge and focus. In 2015, our overall profit was $368 million. This translates into roughly $18 a guest. This number of $18 a guest is not something widely understood and informs our perspective on how we see the role of government in our sector. Our industry is eagerly awaiting the release of David Emerson's review of the Canadian Transportation Act. We have made a thorough submission that covers every aspect of commercial aviation, but for the purposes of this committee, I'd like to highlight what we see as the #1 issue government can address. Aviation cost structure for WestJet is the single most important public policy issue facing commercial aviation going forward. It limits our ability to fulfill our role as an overall economic catalyst for the economy, consumers, and communities, large and small. We find ourselves increasingly undermined by escalations in either the cost to access airport infrastructure or in charges applied to consumers to support facilities and government services. We believe the cost gap to be widening thanks to a rigid adherence to the uniquely Canadian user pay principle for aviation services, which is used to justify everything from steadily increasing airport improvement fees to an air traveler's security charge exponentially larger than the U.S. equivalent. We recommend that this committee recognize the stimulative nature of our investments on the Canadian economy and recommend in its report that the government make aviation cost structure a priority issue. we are seeking the establishment of a senior-level government industry working group to take a close and focused look on the competitiveness of commercial aviation in Canada. I would also like to note we are in support of the recommendations made by our industry association, the National Airlines Council of Canada. Specifically, we would welcome increased funding to CATSA, but more than that, we are asking that revenue the government collects from the air traveler security charge be tied directly to funding for screening services. Also, continued streamlining of border processing and security screening at our airports is becoming increasingly important for our sector to compete overall. We would also welcome government support in these areas. Thank you for your time and consideration this afternoon, and I'd be pleased to take your questions.
Thank you very much to you and to all the witnesses. First round of questioning, 7 minutes, Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for all your presentations. Mr. Dyes, I'm going to start with you. Apprentices has actually come up a lot in our marathon sessions over the last 4 days. And you touched on several. In fact, you touched on one that is very important to me that we haven't really heard about, but getting those with disabilities into the workforce as well. So apprenticeships, I'm from Ontario, so I know it's different in different provinces, but how do we encourage, and you tied it directly with the infrastructure investment, how do you and your membership see it in terms of tying directly the opportunity to actually have apprenticeship opportunities? Because what I've heard from certainly building trades is that they'll provide a lot of the training, but they can't get certified because there's not enough, apprenticeship spots. And then so these individuals can't actually then operate in the workforce. So is that the same kind of problem that you're seeing? And then how do we help fix this through the infrastructure investments?
The apprenticeship model in Canada needs to be overhauled. And the funding of the apprenticeship program needs to be overhauled. And let me give you an example. We have put into place some very unique programs with progressive employers, Irving Shipbuilding, for example. We put into place a program called Women in Trades, where there are 25 women who are now starting as welders in the Irving Shipbuilding facilities, which is predominantly male. We have just negotiated with Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler. We are now in the process of bargaining and negotiating and training for the next generation based on the technological changes in the auto industry. Amongst that program is also a program of women in trades, where we are encouraging women to take an apprenticeship. So how do we strengthen the apprenticeship opportunities? How do we put into place a system that will encourage employers? For example, we can certainly use the unemployment insurance system as an opportunity to pay employees that are going through the educational aspect of the apprenticeship. When apprentices are in school, I believe that they should be paid out of their unemployment insurance fund. Why? Because it's the next step of development. You will find that those types of impediments cause employers to balk. They don't mind paying if a person is physically producing something within a manufacturing or a workplace, but they're reluctant, of course, to invest for the months and months and months of academic time. So we need to identify, if we're talking about workers with disabilities, the trades that would be very important, the opportunities for not only workers with disabilities, but we can start to walk through a whole host of workers in Canada that need assistance.
Thank you very much. And my next question is to you as well in regards to the auto industry. And I will say, although I'm from Durham and Oshawa, but not Oshawa specifically, but my counterparts on when I was on municipal council raised this often. But I've been learning a lot by MP John Oliver, who's my seatmate in the House. But one of the ideas that I know has been kind of talked about, or one of the areas that has been casually brought up, is the idea of streamlining the process in Canada. For example, I think Mexico, and I could be wrong, so this is where I want some clarification, but there's almost like a one-stop shop for government agencies and for companies who want to invest or build. It's a lot of the times it's just so much easier in places where they don't have to go through potentially, 3 or 4 levels of government depending where you are. Is there a more developed position on this that I can better understand, and if you can help summarize that?
Oh, there's no question. One of the frustrations in the auto industry has been the numerous bureaucratic channels that one would have to go through in order to have the discussions on investment. The system that is in place today federally is one of taxable, repayable loans, which the auto industry consider a joke. Because if they borrow $1 billion, the first thing you have to do is pay tax on it. So the reality is that people keep away from the process that's in place. We have now put into place Ray Tanguay, who is a former Toyota executive, to help put into place a process that is exactly what you're talking about. We need a one-stop shop, which is what they have in Mexico, which is what they have in the United States. So it's a question of harmonizing the process in order to, A, attract the investment, but B, in order to streamline the operation. So it's starting, but it needs to obviously take the next step. We would hope that in the first federal budget that the government will give a message to the auto industry that once again, you are interested in enhancing this industry because the auto industry has felt neglected for quite a few years.
One more question.
Okay, thank you. To Mr. Gibbons, I just want to make sure that I could, was trying to write, and I'm not sure if I missed a point, but in terms of, I think you said there are 2 of the biggest impediments or the cost factors of the aviation cost structure. One is the user fees, or it's kind of the user fee-based system in the sense that customers or airlines are charged, for example, for landing, and then the screening, if I'm summing it up in a simple way, that ultimately has to be passed on to the consumer, right? And this is where there's the small profit margin. Am I understanding this correctly?
Essentially, yes. There's many components that go into aviation cost structure. It's like a bowl of soup. There's all kinds of ingredients. And we want the government's leadership to take a look at all of those different elements and make sure that our partners in airports and in government are all aligned on that objective because it is so critical.
And it's this infrastructure improvement cost as well in terms of the massive cost for not just expansion, but like the existing infrastructure investment and the burden that then puts on the industry. Am I understanding that?
Basically, yes. So we find that airport improvement fees are going up at a very high rate. And the World Economic Forum in 2015 released its International Competitiveness Report for our sector. Canada was #1 in aviation infrastructure, so that's an accomplishment. Airports were divested 20 years ago, so job well done. We have quality infrastructure. But unfortunately, we were 138th in competitiveness on taxes and fees. So we're saying let's start working on that area. Let's tackle that and put some processes in place to make sure that we can bring that up to the world-class standard we all want.
And do you see that as being?
Jennifer, we're stretching it. Mr. Leipert.
Mr. Schultz, on behalf of my 2 colleagues here, I want to assure you that the Conservative caucus has been and will continue to stand up for pipelines such as Energy East. I'll let others at the table answer your request for support. It's February 19th, 2016. Should be the height of the drilling season in Western Canada. Can you tell me approximately how many rigs are active today?
Sure. So today there's approximately 160 drilling rigs working today out of a fleet of about 750. In terms of comparisons of 2014, that would be about 300 same time last year, and then in 2014 around 500.
in your estimation, we may never get back to 500, but I'm sorry, what was the second number you said 2 years ago?
About 500 rigs.
Well, 500. Let's cut that in half and say 250. What would the price of oil, U.S. Crude, have to reach in your estimation for there to be 250 rigs out in the field?
Well, I think that's a difficult question to answer. I would say that in the current market price, there are very few fields in Western Canada that are competitive at $30. And so if we do not see, a significant turnaround in terms of overall commodity pricing, this is just not a sustainable business in today's market. Generally speaking, we are projecting, at least from a forecast perspective, 20% overall utilization for 2016. When you look at that from a jobs impact perspective, generally one rig that's working generates 135 direct and indirect jobs. And so if you use that calculation, we're looking at approximately 30,000 individuals in the service business, my members' business, and their employees who have been impacted significantly since the end of 2014.
In your just sort of general assessment of the situation, were those all Albertans?
No, in fact, when you look at, just the drilling industry, our operations are right across Western Canada from southern Manitoba, stretching across Saskatchewan, Alberta, and into northeast British Columbia. And then, of course, we also represent the offshore drilling rig industry in Atlantic Canada, who have also been heavily impacted by this as well.
I know that, and you mentioned in your remarks that Alberta, or the industry, I guess, more so, because it certainly is impacting British Columbia and Saskatchewan, Newfoundland and Labrador, is not looking for handouts or bailouts, but are there things that the federal budget could do that would soften the blow, let's say? And I had a fellow say to me last week when I was on my constituency break that, he got this big severance payout, and unfortunately he has to pay all his income tax this year on that payout. Are there some things, as an example, that maybe the Minister of Finance could look at where those kind of severance payouts could be spread out over 3 years?
So we have come out publicly in support of an initiative that the Premier Wall has presented as what I think is a very targeted program that would inject activity in the very industry, the very small businesses that are in desperate need right now. I think that programs like that put some of the oil field workers who are patiently sitting by the phone waiting for the rig manager to pick up the phone and say, hey, we're ready to get back to work.
And so just to be clear, that's the cleanup of abandoned wells.
Yeah, and I want to also mention that nobody is taking the responsibility for the producing community to clean up abandoned wells, but I think given the unprecedented times that we're in, this is I think an important targeted program to think about.
I think it's also important to have it on the record that the NDP government in Alberta has rejected that as an idea, so let's just leave that at that. I want to have a quick question for my friend from WestJet, Mr. Gibbons. To the best of your knowledge, first of all, in the 20 years that WestJet has been such a success, has WestJet, as a company involved in the aircraft industry, ever applied for or received a federal government loan, grant, or financial bailout?
We have not, no.
And are you unionized at all?
We are not, no.
Thank you.
You have an intelligent question for my friend to my left?
Thank you.
I wanted to say if you were late.
Thank you, Mr. Lightfoot.
If you were late on our flight, I apologize.
Order. Mr. Schultz, just something that you might want to look at that happens in the agriculture sector. When there's a drought or a disaster and people have to sell off their livestock kind of thing, and it makes this big income. In that sector, there's a deferred payment program, which means you can stretch out your income tax over a number of years. It might be something you want to look at for your industry as well. Turning to Mr. Caron.
Je vais commencer avec Monsieur Schultz.
I'll start with Mr. Schultz. Very respectfully, because before I was elected, I worked for part of a union which now falls under Mr. Diaz, and whose members, some of the members of this union worked for Suncor. I understand today's reality, though, and I know it's really tough for the industry. You're very passionate by what you do. I got your message loud and clear, and I understand that we want to think long and hard about your sector because there are a lot of myths, so I agree with you on all those points. However, I do want to point out that it works both ways. When I was the spokesperson for the NDP critic for natural resources, Energy Est, of course, came up, and you mentioned this in your presentation. So Energy East made headlines. So I decided to hold information sessions on what the implications were for Energy East, especially in Quebec, not to take position, not to tell people what to think. I did this to consult people, to know what they think, but I also did so to get information from both parties, so the proponents of the project, and I wanted to hear the views of people who are opposed to the project as well. I wanted people to also take an informed view of pipelines. I did not only do this on my own ridings, but I traveled across the country. And I also did this in places where people were very sensitive, such as Saint-Augustin-des-Maures in Quebec, where the pipeline would cross the St. Lawrence River. I think I've done my share. I've played my role to hold informed debate on the issue. I don't want any accusations from you. I want to engage in real debate with you here. Before asking you my question, however, I also want to point out that there are myths on both sides of the debate, and I'm really frustrated when I hear, for example, Conservatives say that Eastern Canada receives oil from Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, and Nigeria, and from the Middle East, and that this is not ethical oil. Do you know how many barrels of oil came to Quebec and Ontario in 2015? 0. How many were imported from the Middle East in 2015? 0. Again, 60% of oil imports come from the United States, and the rest generally come either from Nigeria or from Norway. So, if we want a well-informed debate, it has to happen on both sides. So, my question is the way the debate is being presented. When people say the government should encourage the building of pipelines, I'm not saying the government has to create obstacles to pipelines. So I'm trying to be rational here. The project has to be studied by a regulating body, that is the National Energy Board, and environmental consequences also must be assessed because there will be an impact with regard to greenhouse gas emissions, and there might also be economic consequences in the communities where the pipeline would go through. So whether you support or reject a project, well, you need to be informed first. What is the worth of the National Energy Board if a government has already taken position? My question is sincere. I know that you're not calling for the abolition of the NEB or the regulatory process to approve pipelines or to advise the government.
Thank you for the question and for being a truth seeker. You know, we need to have an intelligent conversation, a fact-based conversation that appreciates, I think, both sides. But quite to the contrary about the NEB, and quite frankly, the provincial regulators across the country that regulate the energy industry. These bodies are considered the world standard. In fact, when you look at, we speak quite regularly with regulators in the province of Alberta, and they have often told me that their model, the way that we develop and regulate our industry, is something that the international community wants to learn from. And in fact, we see time and time again where our regulators are sharing the good news story around the globe about how we develop our industry, and it's something that we can be incredibly proud of and confident in. I think what we need is we need the federal government to acknowledge and show confidence in our regulatory processes, because they are the best in the world, and they are seen as an example for so many other oil and gas producing regions globally. I hope that answers your question.
Partiellement aussi, mais il faut que vous reconnaissiez.
In part, yes, but you must also recognize, I hope I have enough time left, Mr. Chairman. 1 minute. Yeah, people are still concerned. Social license, it's an expression that's bandied about a lot, but when it comes to a project like this one, social license must be earned. And in the information sessions and discussions I've had, it seems that many people are concerned. They are afraid that the NEB is not going to do a good enough job in 15 months on such a complex project. These people also do not believe that the NEB can conduct the environmental assessment, which used to be carried out by provincial and federal departments. So how do you equate social license with the NEB and a process which currently is not trusted by the population, especially in Eastern Canada, where there has never been a huge project like this one?
To our political leaders to talk about what goes into these regulatory reviews. There is more environmental study, engineering studies, transparency, and evaluation now than at any point in our history. And the outcomes of these systems on energy, including pipelines, will allow us to move our energy to markets in a seamless way with an extraordinary safety record. When we talk about social license, I would argue, I think the social license arguments have already been made. We just need to start talking about them louder and clearer from all levels of government. Let's talk about $80 billion in 2015, the largest private sector investor that goes into hiring families and workers and employing family businesses across Western Canada, $17 billion in taxes across the country that goes into hiring nurses and teachers. 500,000 people, indirect. There's been studies that show over the course of 10 years that the oil and gas industry will contribute $7.6 trillion to the Canadian GDP. You know, when we look at how this impacts provinces across the country, 8% of all oil sands jobs are employed in the province of Ontario. The oil sands employs some 300 Aboriginal companies in 54 communities, and over the past 14 years has contributed $10 billion to Aboriginal companies. You know, when we look at you know, other suppliers and companies, there's 2,300 companies that are outside of the province of Alberta that supply services and manufacturing to the oil and gas industry. 1,100 are in the province of Ontario, 200 are in the province of Quebec. This is an incredibly spread out industry that impacts so many families and businesses that should be supported across the country.
Okay, we're well over, but I thought it was fair to provide the information. Mr. McKinnon.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of our witnesses, and thank you for your very interesting presentations. My first question is for U15. It's about research. Can you give us the history or the background of research in the last 25 years and funding for granting agencies? Can you perhaps tell us about how we got to the point where U15 was created? In your view, what difference would increased investment make in primary research?
15 has been in existence for the past 3 years. Its first incarnation was at G10, 10 research-intensive universities in Canada. They came together because we had very special objectives, needs, but also a role to play. That is to combine, which is partially an answer to various questions that were raised around me today, to create, to educate the kind of talent at our universities that will be in an environment, a very rich, research-rich environment, that the combination of both will address many social, scientific, and economic questions, which will be the cornerstone of future economies. So with that, this group started growing, and finally it became 15 universities from all parts of Canada, and we formed a formal secretariat for this group, and we called it U15, so 15 research-intensive universities came about. The reason why we believe that U15 universities have a special mandate is because research is sometimes looked at as something it has to be a curiosity-based, that out of that curiosity there are a number of fantastic results that we can achieve. And that has to be done with no pressures from any side, that in its natural way, but it finds its way to make sure that it goes into the society in various forms and shapes. So for that, granting councils, the 3 granting councils, NSERC, for science and engineering, SURE for social science and humanities, and CIHR for health research, they provide absolutely the kind of funds that every researcher at the university is dependent upon. That is the fund that enable our researchers to go into their whatever research they're involved in, to conduct those research and be able to recruit absolutely the top brilliant minds as graduate students to work with them. The results are, in a way, again, as it's linked to various things we talk about here, our future of our economies. Are we going to grow our own knowledge in this country that our manufacturing industry, our healthcare, various other sectors will be dependent on, so that it will be a Canadian-grown know-how, intellectual property? Or are we going to rely on other countries to create that intellectual property so that we can bring them here and our role will be reduced to an assembly line process? We want to be able to say that Canada is a global leader in the creation of that intellectual property because we are investing in that research enterprise. And our granting councils, again, without which I don't think that I will be here talking to you or any of our researchers would have accomplished what they have accomplished today.
Et donc, l'historique au cours des 20 dernières...
So over the last 20 years, in terms of government investment, compared to where we are today, compare that to where we are today, and what exactly are you asking for of us today?
Through various channels and through councils, they have received funding, but unfortunately that funding didn't keep up with the inflation. As a result, today, if you compare today's funding to 2007, we are under by $176 million. So our ask is very clear. Please, over the next 4 years, correct this and keep growing this, because this is the investment that will pay back in many, many folds if we are able to do that.
Mr. Dias, your members tend to work for profitable companies?
I'm sorry?
Your members tend to work for profitable companies?
Oh, absolutely. We represent workers at Suncor, Bombardier, Ford, General Motors, Chrysler. I can start to walk through the list. Air Canada.
I just thought that list might be informative.
Doing very well.
For Mr. Leipert as well. Bombardier, évidemment, nous sommes à débattre dans les médias.
Now, obviously, Bombardier has made headlines, and we've been talking about the potential public investment in Bombardier. You've analyzed the aerospace sector in the past. I think you spoke publicly about the sector. Can you tell the committee more specifically about how you perceive Bombardier's situation, its competitors abroad, and perhaps you can also tell us about the importance and the impact of investment in the aerospace sector.
Canada, about 20 years ago, was number 4 in the world in the aerospace industry. Today we sit about 12th. That's what happens when you take your eye off the ball. The facts are is Bombardier employs about 17,000 direct employees. The current situation is not unusual. The fact that the C series is delayed 2 years is not unusual. Boeing's Dreamliner was delayed over 2 years because of electrical difficulties. Airbus's latest launch was delayed over 2 years because of a whole host of issues as it related to the certification. So when major employers invest billions of dollars and then it takes years to get to market, it's not unusual for them to face a cash crunch, and that's what they're faced with today. But the reality is the C-Series is probably the most developed aircraft of its type in the world. Its competitors would be the C-19 and from Airbus and the 737 with Boeing. You'll find that the C-Series is 20 to 25% more fuel efficient. So what you're facing with here is a Canadian icon, and the real question is, are you in the game or not? If Canada wants to participate in the aerospace sector, then the government's going to have to play a leadership role, just like they do in Germany, just like they do in France, just like they do in Brazil, just like they do in China, and just like they do in the United States. And you will find that all of these companies are successful because of the role of government, because the government understands the payback, not just in personal taxes, but the payback that's created through the spin-off jobs that are created by the high-tech nature of the jobs.
For people on the question lists, and we're going to try and get them all in. That'll mean we'll go to 3-minute questions. Go ahead, Mr. Albas.
Thank you. Mr. Schultz, just a quick question to you. First of all, there's obviously more than one way of getting, at least what I've heard from people in your sector, is that they'd like to see more opportunities to get their product to Tidewater. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so given that, this whole discussion about social license, there are more than one way to get your product to market. Ones that don't require social license. For example, I don't believe there's any requirements on trains or trucks. Is that correct?
I'm not an expert in that field, but that's certainly how it is being transported today.
Okay, because it seems to me that by applying, this new criteria to it, really sends a signal to those people that want to use pipelines and believe that they're the safest form. It's an extra impediment to take longer. And if the price goes up, and I certainly hope it does, because of many of the points you raised earlier, that I believe will have, they'll just go to those other paths. Is that correct?
We have seen examples where the lack of pipeline infrastructure has resulted in a significant increase in rail transportation, yes.
Good. Now, I imagine to do what you do with all the drilling and whatnot, there's a huge amount of geographical sciences as well as other types of scientists that are hired privately to do what you do. Is that correct?
Well, the oil and gas service sector is, there are hundreds of different companies that have different expertise. It is a very segmented industry from seismic to drilling to well servicing to wireline operating to transportation to vac truck operators. You know, the list goes on. It is largely a business that is run from a contracting perspective. There's not a lot of equipment or expertise that is housed in a standard E&P company.
I raise that, Mr. Chair, is simply just because, you know, there's both private scientists, there's public scientists, and I certainly appreciate that the revenue that many of your industry provides to governments, provincially as well as federally, allows them to be able to supply more science activities because they have the revenues for it. In the same way, for example, in West Kelowna, where I'm from, we have people that are employed or that are unemployed right now who usually work in the oil and gas sector, and they're having, unfortunately, to make use of society as much as many of the witnesses we have here today. So I appreciate what you do for your communities. Just jumping over to that point, I also have noticed that with WestJet, Mr. Gibbons, there's been a lot of changes in your flight schedules. Is it because the oil and gas sector is down?
We have seen a softening of demand in Western Canada. That is true. Yeah.
So if fewer people are taking trips, you know, whether it be to work in the oil and gas or they just don't have money in their pockets because the small businesses they work at aren't being frequented by many of the people employed by oil and gas, that probably means they can't buy cars as well. So I think that this is something where it becomes quickly, you can see how we all seem to suffer when we don't have a good economy. Now, I'd like just to move to Mr. Diaz just briefly. Sir, and I'm going to...
very brief, one question.
So what's the age demographic for someone who works in the auto sector?
Oh, it's changing based on the massive hirings in Ford and Oakville and in Windsor. I would say it would be mid-40s.
Okay, mid-40s. Now, given that you've talked about innovation, need for government to support innovation, and how competitive the world market is, particularly in the auto sector, doesn't more innovation mean more automated plants and things like that? What kind of challenges does that pose for you and your members?
I think you will find that our plants are world-class. There's been billions invested on innovation. I think you'll find, for example, General Motors in Oshawa spent about $1.2 billion making a flexible plant where you can build multiple models. Chrysler has invested about $3.6 billion in the last 2 years in both Brampton and their Windsor assembly plants, putting into place flexible platforms. Ford and Oakville, $1.2 billion, flexible platform. So I think you will find that Canada is poised as one of the best in the world as it comes to their manufacturing process through the type of innovation that's in place today.
Mr. Sabera. They'll get the lights, guys.
Thank you, Mr.
That's
Chair.
why they got the
I wish to thank everyone's comments from the panel, particularly Vanessa and Mary. Thank you for your stories and sharing them with us today. Quick question, Mr. Schultz. Level of drilling activity every week. There's a number that comes out that shows Canada, U.S. Drilling rig activity. It's really connected with the price of oil and what happens there. What determines the level of drilling activity and the world price of oil relatively WTI, correct?
That would be correct.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of the NAB process, you know, the Energy East pipeline is going to be going through the NAB process, and our government has strengthened that process, and is obviously the NAB will be consulting with all stakeholders, including Indigenous groups, and we're going to make sure that that process has the confidence of all stakeholders, and I think that's the way it should be, and then we'll see where the decision proceeds from there. Wouldn't you agree that that's the right type of process to go under?
Well, I would argue, sorry, I thought somebody was talking to me here. My argument would be that we need the federal government to put some political capital on the line. I think it's incredibly important that the federal government show leadership, that they are behind these pipelines, that they support the industry. I can tell you there are so many families that have reached out to us through our Oil Respect campaign that are in desperate need of a government that understands that in order for them to have a growing, vibrant industry, that we need to look at pipeline infrastructure, and so they're looking for leadership.
And we are providing that leadership in our reforms to the NEB process, and we will be undertaking that. To Mr. Gibbons from WestJet, thank you for your comments. I think there's a real, in Canada, needs to be a real educational process and the importance of clustering and what it relates to airports and airlines. In the GTA, the GTAA is one of the largest, and the surrounding area is one of the largest employers and probably has one of the biggest economic impacts and footprints in the GTA. There's been a number of studies done, including from the Senate, if my memory serves me correctly, where we in Canada look at airports as ATM machines, and in the south of the border they look at them as economic generators, whether you kind of comment on to ground lease payments. I am looking forward to, I believe Monday there's a presentation at the Toronto Region Board of Trade, I think it is, on the importance of the aviation industry, and I'll be attending that. So I just wanted to make that comment. I think you're bang on in terms of the cost structure, which impacts airline carriers versus what the rest of the world has. Because we do have world-class airports. We've done a phenomenal job there. I think there's some work that can be done on the other side as well.
The report is named Toll Booth or Spark Plug, and
Yes.
it was Senator Dawson who chaired that committee, and that's a very positive report for us.
Thank you. And I just want to go to Mr. Diaz very quickly. Jerry, we've chatted a number of times on the auto industry, and we all know the story there and how we need to make sure we're at the table. I do want to comment and ask you the apprenticeship model. The German model seems to be the model where they get a lot of folks streaming into apprenticeships, and their technical jobs are sophisticated, whether you're working for Mercedes or Siemens. What can we do in Canada to maybe replicate some of the things they're doing in Germany?
Well, I think you just nailed it. In Germany, for example, they value the auto industry, and they use the auto industry as a foundation for their export. So what they do is they will have everyone in a room. I used to sit as a part of the co-determination group as a Canadian with the Daimler-Chrysler merger. Now, what do they talk about? First thing they have is a tripartite system where they'll have, well, more than tripartite, they'll have the companies, the unions, the educational facilities. They'll have everybody in one room to talk about the challenges, to talk about the future, and then how they're going to cope with it. So coming out of that tripartite discussion, we'll talk about the skills that are necessary, therefore the apprenticeships. They'll talk about the changing technology, therefore the educational community can put into place the training educational matrix in order to be prepared for the next generation. Probably about 4 years ago, the previous government canceled all of the sectorial councils, where everybody would get into a room to discuss the challenges of the industry and what the future would look like. I would suggest that this government should look to reinstate that common sense dialogue so that we can deal with the future.
There, Mr. Fast, a couple of quick questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me begin by thanking both Vanessa Gamblin as well as Mary Podlaski for your input here. You put the human face on what we do when we discuss budgets, and thank you, Mary, for your sharing your touching story with us. When we talk about budgets, often it's about deficits, it's about surpluses, it's about industrial investments, it's about infrastructure, and often the human face of our country gets left behind, and thank you for highlighting that for us today. Andy Gibbons, nice to see you again. As you discussed the challenges and the aviation cost structure that is presenting challenges for your industry and for WestJet, you didn't mention airport rents to any significant degree. I understand airport rents actually have a significant impact on your profitability and viability of routes. Can you comment?
Thanks for the question. Great to see you again, too, Mr. Fast. Airport rents, there have been, airports have paid over $5 billion to the Government of Canada in airport rents. Our request on airport rents is for that to be capped and for that money, like the air traveler security charge, like the excise tax on aviation jet fuel, is to be reinvested into the sector. That's what happens in the United States. The sector is seen as an economic mobilizer, more so than in Canada. And back to what Mr. Sabara was saying about toll booth or spark plug, we're working to attempt to change the overall approach of the sector. Airport rent is a part of that.
Thank you. One last question is to Mr. Diaz. You mentioned the TPP. You and I are on different pages on that agreement. Canada has concluded negotiations on trade agreements with 51 different countries. Of those agreements, how many has Unifor and its predecessor CAW ever supported?
We would actively like to support one that benefits Canadians. We would like a government to negotiate a trade deal that actually is about trade, where I give you something and you give me something, as opposed to a one-way street. I think you will find that we are on a different page, especially as it relates to the TPP, and even the previous trade deal, Korea, because the Korea deal has now been in place for 14 months. Exports from Canada to Korea have decreased 5%, and imports from Korea to Canada have increased 8%.
Actually, it was a very simple yes or no question. Has Unifor ever supported one of the trade agreements with 51 different countries around the world?
Unifor is a little over 2 years old, so no, we have not supported Korea. Apparently nobody is supporting CETA because it still hasn't been passed in 2.5 years, and certainly we are not supporting the TPP. The former CAW, I can't speak for its incredible history, but I know that we did oppose NAFTA, and I think the reason is clear if we look today. All of the jobs are being created in the most important sectors in Mexico, and they're not being created here in Canada.
I'll have to cut you there, Jerry. Mr. Ouellette, you'll have to wrap it up. You got 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that, and I really appreciate all the witnesses for coming here today. It's very much I really enjoyed hearing some of the information you brought. My question is actually for Vanessa from Salam Mission. You know, the federal government has established policing programs in various cities around the country, and often homeless citizens are often involved in the justice system. There are additional costs of being homeless. But, you know, Salam Mission has been preparing one of the solutions which has been very innovative, and that's the Housing First strategy. I was wondering if you could talk about the Housing First strategy.
Well, currently we do have that operating, and so Siloam just partakes within that strategy. But what we are doing on the side is we're just starting to now work and consult with the Winnipeg Police, and then so we're going to be looking at ways on better communication with the justice system for our homeless populations, because currently we're seeing a staggering amount of behaviors just influxing more, like, and our community members being subjected to more violence within the police department. So we're just trying to work with them now on different types of communication.
But the Housing First strategy is essentially the housing is all provided in Salam Mission. It's a group of 3 major housing homeless shelters in Winnipeg for the 1,400 people. Main Street Project, which helps with the sniffers, the Salvation Army, and Salam Mission working together. And the idea is to provide a holistic model where everyone is working together. And I believe that's what it is. And they provide the housing to keep people off the street, so they're not involving police, ambulance drivers, firefighters that are always trying to respond to issues time and time again, and costing a lot of money and making the streets sometimes a little bit perhaps more chaotic than they need to be.
That is correct.
Okay. And then, you know, I'd just like to, Mary, thank you very much for your, you know, what you were saying. Is there things that we could be doing a little bit more to help out organizations like yours, because you serve women from the age of 14 all the way up to 40, I believe, and you provide, and a lot of them are some of them come from very disadvantaged backgrounds, some from middle class backgrounds, but it's a wide variety and diversity of people.
Well, I think that what we're trying to do is to stop a cycle. We're trying to arrest a behavior that might continue if the child is born without the support that we're able to offer them. So we basically, you know, we wrap the mother in, you know, a metaphorical blanket where she has the support on all sides, from teachers, from social workers, from the medical team. She's taught breastfeeding skills. She's taught she has someone come into her home after her child is born to help her with parenting. And I think that you know, there are schools, I've spoken to teachers at post-secondary that are very happy when they have girls who have come from Villa Rosa, because they work very hard. They have a lot that they want to offer, and they're learning that at Villa Rosa.
Thank you very much, Mary. Mr. Ouellette, I would certainly like to thank the witnesses this afternoon. This As of now, we've met with 92 witnesses over the last 4 days. It's been a long, week, and I think you can tell from this panel that there's been a very broad spectrum of witnesses that come before this committee. I would say, because we're still getting briefs coming in, that if any members get a call from someone, there's no question we missed some groups. In fact, one is sitting at the back of the room there representing universities. We've certainly missed some groups, but there will be still the opportunity until 11:59 tonight to get a letter or a brief on the website, and those will be considered as well in terms of the committee's final report. So with that, I thank the witnesses and thank committee members for their endurance over a fairly long week. The meeting adjourned.